hand, the contracts of actual managers like Pep or Moyes had no limits on their job role and their involvement with transfers and contracts. But those guys are actually in the minority now, and it's a change that's happened pretty quickly. In 2019, there were only 6 head coaches in the Premier League, but by 2025, there were 14.
Hello and welcome to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express. I'm Kevin Hatchard, deputising for Danny tonight. And alongside me, the man who is to this show what Susie Dent is to Countdown, the European football expert, Andy Brassell. Really excited about this show tonight. We're about to run you through not one, but 2 alleged scandals that could rock Italian football. We'll talk about why league games outside their home country could finally be happening across Europe and elsewhere from next season. Barcelona closing in on the La Liga title, but they've had a massive injury setback, and we've got semi-finals to look forward to across all 3 European competitions. So many other stories to dig into as well. The Trans-Europe Express has left the station, and you're all very welcome. Andy, a very good evening to you. How are you?
Good evening. All the better for being compared to Susie Dent by you. It's been a great weekend for me. Antoine Heckford Ballon d'Or, by the way. So, yeah, I couldn't feel any better as we embark on this 3-hour journey.
And you know how much I love Countdown, so you know how much that is a gold star given to you. Andy, we're going to go through, first of all, some of the big games that are happening at the moment. You've got a game you're keeping an eye on in Liga.
Yeah, I have, and it's still Marseille 0, Nice 0 on the south coast of France. We're approaching the hour mark in that. Plenty of Marseille huff and puff. No goals as of yet. Amusing set to in the first half between Leandro Balerdi and Elis Way as well. And we're still 0-0 in Italy, Kevin, which is slightly behind that, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. It's 57th minute. Milan 0, Juventus 0. Juventus did have a goal ruled out in the first half. Kefren Turam judged to be offside, so it is 0-0 in that game at the moment. And in La Liga, Villarreal are 2-0 up against Celta. Villarreal closing in on a Champions League spot. Early penalty from Gerard Moreno, and then a really nice finish from Nicola Pepe. So then, let's get on to the big stories straight away. Italian football rocked by an investigation into referees chief Gianluca Rocchi, who is facing allegations that he manipulated referee assignments and applied undue pressure on VAR teams. Now, he has self-suspended. He stepped down while the investigation continues. Here to give us the details of this is Italian journalist and Trans-Europe Express clan member Daniele Fisichella. Daniele, great to have you with us. This has really worrying echoes of the scandal that engulfed Italian football 20 years ago.
Good evening, Kev. Good evening, Andy. Yes, obviously the echoes is what happened with Calciopoli back in 2006. But at the time being, and let's start with the facts. There are a few line of inquiries, of course, that are related to Gianluca Rocchi, the head of refereeing, which will have to respond to the magistrates as early as next week on the 30th of April. Now, at the moment, this is an investigation that the Italian Football FA is following on from an inquiry from the magistrates in Milan, an investigation that the FA itself had closed last season, but it was reopened a few months ago. Now, there are reasons to believe that aside from the elements that we do know and the allegations for Gianluca Rocchi at the time being are of having assigned two referees to two Inter matches because one of those referees allegedly was liked by Inter and another one was not liked. Therefore, by assigning the referee Valeri, he would have been outside of the pool of potential referees for upcoming matches in the title race. We're talking about last seasons, of course. And then there is the famous or infamous incident of where Rocchi himself would have knocked on the VAR room during a live match, Udinese-Parma. And there are videos, there is a video showing the VAR and the AVAR, the assistant VAR, turning their heads and almost saying to Rocchi, is that a penalty? And then asking the referee to go to the on-field decision. So these are the allegations, and of course have to be proven that they have compromised and they have obviously made the competition irregular. So that this is where we stand at the moment.
So Daniele, I guess we always know this is framed in whichever country, and it's the same in Turkey or Portugal, for example, framed in terms of inter-club rivalry. So after Juventus bore the brunt of the last Calciopoli, we've seen Beppe Marotta, the former CEO of Juventus, now CEO of Inter, of course, come out and say, look, we're relaxed because this has got nothing to do with us. This has got nothing to do with Inter. Have Juventus responded to this?
No, Juventus, they have not officially responded, but as you can imagine, social media, it's full of conspiracy theories because, of course, the echoes of Calciopoli, where the Juventus fans, and not only them, also the Milan fans, the Fiorentina fans, they still feel hard done by something that perhaps they were not just... They were part of the system, but they were not the only one. And with the main beneficiaries of that inquiry in 2006 being, of course, Inter, who were given the Scudetto in 2006 as Juventus got stripped. Well, of course, the rumors have started spreading. There is a common say in Italy that the Italian Serie A is so-called Marotta League, because apparently, and this is the belief, the influence of Giuseppe Marotta, the CEO of Inter, former managing director of Juventus, is so vast that he's able to manipulate referee assignation and decision. I think we need to strike a line here, of course. First of all, Inter didn't necessarily benefit by allegedly Rocchi making those decisions because they lost the two games where the referees were assigned to them. And the referees that were not liked by them, in this case, Valeri, who's international referee, then refereed other games last season and this season. Hence, that means that the sphere of influence of Rocchi perhaps is not what is believed to be. But of course, that casts a lot of doubts about how the refereeing system works, how referees are managed, and how they are assigned. It seems to me that since the FA chairman Gabriele Gravina was forced to resign following the elimination of Italy from the playoff in the World Cup, the castle is falling down. The situation at the Italian FA and at the refereeing association is extremely fractious. There are factions fighting against each other for power, and this probably is a result and a consequences of that, because this inquiry starts from the complaint of a fellow referee that was allegedly bullied and put aside by Rocky. And of course, Rocky, it is a man, probably has a lot of friends in Italian football, but also a lot of enemies as well, being in a position of power.
Is there a danger here, Daniele, that if the Italian FA can't get its house in order, the Italian government has to step in? And we know in general that FIFA don't like any kind of governmental interference in football association business. But is that a danger here, that the government might feel they have to step in and clean this up to some extent?
Absolutely. The timing could not be worse for the Italian FA. First of all, because there are the presidential election due at the end of June, but also because if a responsibility for the Italian FA and also for Lega Serie A is proven, then the Italian FA could be placed under external administration, and that's what the sport minister Andrea Abodi has said this very morning. So the issue is also reputational as well. Whereas the Sporting Justice is going to find out and is going to conclude its investigation in the next 60 days, it's going to move very quickly. The Sporting Justice moves much quicker than the regular justice, of course. The reputational damage for Lega Serie A and the FA could be huge and could have, of course, political ramifications for the game in Italy and how it's perceived abroad.
Goal in Marseille, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg has given Marseille the lead against Nice. Diving header, 1-0. So good news for them as they try and get their European challenge back on track. Daniele, can you briefly explain to us the other big story from Serie A this week, which involves a potential prostitution network involving Serie A players?
Yes, there are over 60 players in Serie A that have allegedly used the sexual services of prostitutes thanks to the intermediation of an agency based in Milan. Now, these 60 over players of Serie A, some of them are very famous. We don't know the names yet, but these players are not under investigation because paying for sexual services in Italy is not a crime. Offering those same services if people are over 18 years old is not a crime. What is a crime is to manage those services and making money from them. That's why 4 people have been arrested in Milan, 3 men and a woman. And it is believed that the business was around 1 million euros with over 200,000 pounds paid only by football players. What were the football players doing? Well, basically, they were getting access to dinners in top places, in companies of girls, and some of those services were extras. So there was, of course, a hotel room booked. There was also laughing gas involved in that. Now, the name of the players have been gathered from phone tappings. The people who have been arrested, the 4 people who have been arrested, will have to start answering questions in court from tomorrow. It will be very, very embarrassing for those players if they will have to be called to testify, to tell magistrates what they did and what they know. But let's stress it once again, they are not under investigation unless it is understood that they made a gain from those business, which seems unlikely.
It is a busy but perhaps a tough time to be a journalist following Italian football at the moment. Certainly a lot going on. Daniele, thanks for joining us. Always great to have you with us and explained beautifully some complex situations there. It's still Milan 0, Juventus 0, by the way, in that big game in Serie A. Still 2-0 to Villarreal against Celta Vigo. Our poll tonight, by the way, which team will win the Champions League this season? Arsenal, Atletico Madrid, Bayern Munich or PSG? So you can give us your view on that. You can text 81089 or you can also get in touch with us on our social media channels as well. Coming up, the big stories keep on coming your way on Trans Europe Express. We're going to talk about the potential of league games being pushed abroad. Could the Premier League games be played in Spain? Could La Liga end up in Saudi? We'll discuss that after the break.
What's happened?
Hello, matey.
What's happened?
You all right?
How are you, matey? You good?
I'm all right. Yeah, very well. Thank you very much.
Gaffer's gone.
Yeah.
Gaffer's
After
slapped.
yeah, last night's performance
Slapped.
was unacceptable, mate.
Yeah, he got slapped.
Yeah, something
Slap.
that could not stay the same. The run of results and performances have just led to this. I mean, you heard me last night. I was absolutely crestfallen last night.
Thought he done well, mate. Thought he done well.
Well,
First
the
2
fact
minutes,
that
he was
he's
good.
gone suggests that he didn't. You know, it's one of those situations that something had to give, and we weren't. You know, you can't go through over 8 hours of football without scoring a match in a game in the Premier League. You can't do that. Those glasses look ridiculous.
What do you mean?
Are they hurting your eyes? I'll put them on. They start to.
I can't see nothing.
So if I do some hand signals to you, you won't see them.
No, I can't see. I actually genuinely. I'm disappointed. He's a good manager, Rosinha.
Well,
Playing some good stuff.
he may well be in the future a very good manager, but right here, right now, things were falling apart at the seams, and they were.
You're listening to Trans Europe Express. We've already covered two scandals in Italian football. We're only, 17 minutes into the show. 0-0 in Serie A between Milan and Juventus. Villarreal still leading Celta by 2-0. Andy, what's going on in Liga? Marseille had taken the lead, hadn't they?
Yeah, it's still 1-0 to Marseille, Kev. We're into the last 20 minutes. But Nice have had a couple of opportunities in the last few minutes. Of course, Marseille not been in great nick of late and looking a little bit nervy, if truth be told.
Now, reports have emerged this week that FIFA are prepared to allow leagues to have one game per season outside of their jurisdiction, and a nation cannot host more than 5 foreign league matches in any one campaign. The reports suggest this could start as soon as next season. Now, of course, we've had a situation where Serie A has tried to stage a game in Australia and that fell through. Villarreal against Barcelona was going to be in Miami, but that didn't work out either. But Andy, the truth of this is that once you set the precedent, this is the thin end of the wedge, because there's no way clubs are just going to stop at one game per season. It'll become 5, then 10, then 15. They're just going to keep pushing for more.
Maybe. I think you have to look at the NFL and NBA as templates as well. And we've
But
seen
the NFL's increased, though, hasn't it? They started with a couple and then it's got bigger and bigger.
Yeah, over time, for sure, but still, it's only a handful of games. Look, I'm not saying this is a good idea, but I'm saying let's put it in some sort of perspective. And same with NBA. You know, they've lent on pre-season games as well to European territories. Of course, it has increased in the last year, so you've had 2 games abroad rather than 1. And I think when there's so much focus on the environmental side of it, and I guess this will be a way to respond to FIFPro and players groups as well, who are concerned about unnecessary trips being made mid-season. I mean, we saw last season with big names of Barcelona players like Frankie de Jong coming out and saying, it's ridiculous Villarreal versus Barcelona being played in Miami. We've got to think about what this is going to do to the players. And when we've seen the NBA, for example, who have a far busier schedule even than footballers, that they would come out and be in Europe for a week and play one game. So instead, now they're playing 2 games. So they feel like they're getting a bit more bang out of it, as well as it being more commercially viable. It feels as if there's rhythm for the players, and the trip is not a load of fluff and very little of the actual sport. So I guess that's when you talk about the thin end of the wedge, how it might develop. If you've got a team going to Saudi for one game, for example, maybe they would make it 2 in time. That's the other thing, of course. In this proposal, it's reported that even if each league was limited to 1 game a season, you would have host countries limited to 5 a season. Now, presumably that covers the Super Cup, which is already in Saudi in the case of La Liga, for example. And if you're talking about thin end of the wedge, this is an example of it accelerating pretty quickly. Of course, we have to say as well, international fans will argue, well, look, these clubs are global entities now. We deserve to see these teams in front of us. Now, look, a lot of us might take the view that a team's identity is where it is situated geographically. And, for those of us who are lucky enough to be able to go and see football over the world, it makes a lot more sense when it's in its home environment.
But this is the point, isn't it? This is the whole thing. Like, the whole point of clubs, and it might sound old-fashioned, but the whole point of clubs in the first place was they were kind of community hubs. And, it was about that community. It was about, your city, your town, your village, even wherever it happens to be. The whole thing is about identity. Now, you're absolutely right. There are fans all over the world who are completely devoted to their teams. They get up at 3, 4 in the morning. They'll watch their team every week. And absolutely, there is a sense of buying and investment from them. But the truth is that these clubs developed and became big because of that tribalism, because of that atmosphere, the atmosphere on the Kop at Liverpool or the Stretford End at Manchester United.
Exactly.
As soon as you start messing around with that, and you start saying, well, okay, we can move it here because there are Liverpool fans all over the world. There are Manchester United fans all over the world. Fine, I understand that, but pre-season games. I think as soon as you start messing around with league games, that's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I accept, for example, as an NBA fan, that I can't go and watch the Houston Rockets every week. And that's fine. If they come to London or Paris or Berlin, then great. But I don't feel like I have a right to that. And I think that when you go in and start supporting a team in the sport, I think you understand that.
Yeah.
I guess, Kev, what I would ask you is, where do you think this takes us then, if this is the thin end of the wedge? I mean, presumably, immediately the first leagues that are going to gravitate towards this Spain and Italy. Both La Liga and Serie A plan to have games abroad this season that didn't come off for a number of reasons that I don't feel are probably that surmountable in the short term, but we can discuss that. I think France as well, if you look at their difficulty in projecting internationally, in projecting Liga internationally, would be another candidate. And of course, these are 3 countries as well that have had their Super Cups played abroad.
Yeah, I think certainly if you look at the ones that I don't think will, Bundesliga fans will not accept it. I can tell you that right now. They protested Monday night games. They're not going to allow a game to disappear over to America or Saudi or what have you. There's been gentle talk about could the Super Cup go over there, but I think even that will get resisted. So I think there'll be a real pushback in Germany. The Premier League, of course, tried the 39th game, floated that. There was a big pushback against that from fans, and it was abandoned. And you look at the ferocity of the protests against the Super League, and I think that gives you an idea of the strength of feeling there. But I think you're right. France has had a nightmare with the TV deals. They are desperate for money across that league. I think certainly the big guns in Spain will push it. I think where I feel the reason I say thin end of the wedge is I think realistically what will happen is if it's a success, say Barcelona take it out to the States and Miami, and they get, really good numbers, and they get, they feel decent money, decent visibility. Other clubs will look at that and think, "Oh, we could do that." And then there'll be a push for more of it. And then what will happen is other leagues will look and go, well, they did it and it worked for them. And it's been huge in terms of bringing in new fans and getting more merchandise sold and what have you. We want a piece of that as well. So,
yeah, and I strongly suspect, Kev, that this has been in clubs' minds, well, for a long time, obviously, but I think the process and the pressure on FIFA, and to me, this feels like FIFA just saying, look, we don't really want to deal with this. Yeah. This is what it is, and you organise yourselves within that. Of course, there's still stuff to do in terms of agreeing referees, as was something prohibitive for Milan Como, for example, which was planned to take place in Perth, Western Australia. But it just felt to me, being out at the Club World Cup last summer, that the biggest clubs, and I think you look at PSG, you look at Atletico, clubs like that, clubs who are trying to break through to being on the same level as Real Madrid and Barcelona and Chelsea and Manchester United in terms of brands. For them, the branding opportunity is as important as the result, more than the result. And I really got that sense that they felt that the Club World Cup, that was the main thing for them rather than the result itself. I think if you ask people inside PSG, they would say despite losing in the final, it was a massive, massive success. And despite the physical difficulties that PSG have had this season in keeping the same team on the pitch all the time due to the schedule, everyone probably in the commercial department of the club would say it was an enormous success.
Yeah, I think there's another issue here about season ticket holders as well, or fans who've been to every home game. I'm going to invent an Atletico Madrid fan called Miguel. He's gone to every home game for 20 years. His dad took him. He now takes his daughter. They've been to every game for 20 years. And then Atleti turn around and go, sorry, Miguel, we're off to Miami. What happens to Miguel? Who pays for his travel? Who subsidizes him? How are they going to work that? Because I do think that has to be a consideration, right?
Of course it does, Kevin. But we've already seen this because, like, for example, when we were going to have Villarreal versus Barcelona in Miami, I don't think it's coincidental that they chose the Villarreal home fixture for that. Yeah. Because not only do you have less resistance, less organised resistance, but you have less compensation to put out there. So Fernando Roig, the owner of Villarreal, said, look, we're going to take all our season ticket holders with us. We'll take you over there. We'll pay for a hotel and your flights.
They're loving that, aren't they? That's great fun.
Exactly. or if not, we give you a 20% rebate on your season ticket. So I take your point about Atletico. It won't be Atletico and Barcelona home games that are given up. I think they've already foreseen a way around that. So just like if you had, I don't know, Brest versus PSG in Singapore, for example, I think that would be the Brest home game rather than the PSG one.
Well, I'm worried about Celine, who's been to every Brest home game for 15 years. Who's looking out for Celine?
On the brink of a holiday of a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly that. I suppose the final thing, Andy, about this is the idea of competitive balance, because it's pretty perfect at the moment. You play everybody once at home, once away. You know where you're at. Once you have one team, say in a title race, that's disappearing off to Riyadh to play a team, it just messes the whole thing up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the fact that you're not having to go away somewhere hostile. I think that makes a difference as well. If we're talking about Brest versus PSG, if you're getting off a windy Wednesday night in Finisterre, you're doing fine, aren't you? Really, if you're gonna stay in a 7-star resort instead, and
it's a bit of a change, isn't it?
And the other team lose their home advantage. It's a massive difference. But I think we've seen in recent weeks, months, years that actually there are a lot of authorities in the game that really don't care about that. And that's why supporters really have to push back on this, I believe, because, we talked a while ago about again in France, the rescheduling of the Lens PSG fixture, which has undoubtedly massively affected the title race. Yes. To the disadvantage of the team with the 10th budget in the league. to the advantage of the team that have the biggest budget in the league by an absolute mile and don't need any more advantages. So, look, I agree with you. I think it's in the same bracket as the Super League, ideologically. Yeah. I think this is something that if supporters don't want, they have to push back hard against. And for what it's worth, I think players will push back against it too.
Celine and Miguel, we salute you. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about the biggest cheat code in European football. It's all coming up on Trans Europe Express.
talkSPORT's Alex Crook has got some information about Enzo Maresca.
Yeah, I think the vibe coming out of the Northwest for some time now has been that Pep Guardiola is more likely to depart than to stay at the end of the season. Whether winning the Premier League title will influence that decision one way or another remains to be seen, but it does seem like the direction of travel is this is going to be the last few weeks of Pep Guardiola's tenure, despite the fact he's got another year left on his contract. There was always a suspicion, I think, from Chelsea that when Enzo Maresca left the club on New Year's Day, his next port of call would be Manchester City. talkSPORT understands Maresca very much the front runner. Should, as expected, Pep Guardiola step down at the end of his trophy-laden tenure at the end of the season. There has been some suggestions that maybe there's still some contractual issues with Chelsea. We're being told by sources close to Maresca that he is free to take another job as soon as this summer. And I've been told by more than one source that high-level talks between Manchester City, their sporting director Hugo Viana, and Maresca have been taking place. Now, that's not to say City want Guardiola to leave now, but of course they have to prepare for that eventuality. So Guardiola likely, we think, to depart at the end of the season, and Enzo Maresca very much the area.
talkSPORT Breakfast returns tomorrow from 6 a.m. as Ali McCoist and Andy Townsend are joined by a host of guests as they look back on a huge weekend in the world of sport. That's the talkSPORT Breakfast Show tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. Do not miss it. It is still 0-0 between Milan and Juventus. They're in the 87th minute of that one at San Siro.
Big goal in France.
Andy Brassell, goal in France. All very exciting.
Yeah, it's Marseille 1, Nice 1, 89th minute. Mamadi challenge on Jonathan Klaus. A very clumsy challenge as Klaus was actually leaving the penalty box. Protracted Marseille protest, but it was a clear penalty. And Eliwai, being the cheeky young man that he is, chipped it straight up the middle. 1-1.
Quite the week for Nice developing. It's still 2-0 to Villarreal against Celta, by the way, but Borja Iglesias has just had a penalty saved. It was given away in ridiculous circumstances. Pap Gay with a absurd challenge on the edge of the area. It was just inside the box and gave away a penalty, but he's got away with it because the penalty has been saved. So Villarreal still 2-0 up in that one. We're going to talk Bundesliga now. And the headline here, Andy, the biggest cheat code in European football. Bayern, who'd already won the league anyway, 3-0 down at Mainz at half-time and brought on some pretty big hitters to help them produce a remarkable comeback?
So, Kevin, the second week in a row. I mean, once when you bring on Michael Olise and Harry Kane at halftime, and we understand they're rotating because they've already won the league. They won the Bundesliga mathematically last week, as we talked about on the show with Lars. And of course, they're resting players going into the Champions League, and they had a big DFB Pokal Cup match in the week as well. But if you're really resting players, do you really need to bring on Olise and Kane at halftime? I mean, once is bad enough. 2 weeks in a row.
It's a flex,
I
isn't it?
understand they
flex.
did it to Stuttgart. It is a flex. And it was funny hearing Vincent Kompany talk about it afterwards and going, yeah, the feeling when we were 3-0 down, because they were 3-0 down in the first half, feeling at halftime was a bit of frustration. And you just think, so you thought you'd take out that frustration by bringing them on. And we had 3 subs scoring for Bayern, didn't we?
Olise's goal is outrageous. It's a classic Robben. Come in on your left foot, find the top corner. He's so good at that. Could
Robben ever finish quite like that, though? I mean, it's an unbelievable goal.
He had his moments.
Yeah, fair. Look, we know the cut-in happens, but it is an unbelievable strike from Olise. That's the one that makes it 3-2. Musiala gets involved. Kane scores the winner in the end as well. And Max Eberl, the sporting director, talked about it afterwards. And, he was clearly glowing with pride. The fact that it would have been quite easy, I think, for them, 3-0 down against the Mainz team that are getting ready to celebrate safety because they've really turned it around since being bottom of the table, coming towards the end of the last calendar year. I think it's really easy for Bayern to jack it in and go, we've won the league already. We've already broken the record for Bundesliga goals in a season for a team. And yet they go after them like that is absolutely merciless, pitiless, and you have to admire it as well.
The word Kompany is used ever since he got there is hunger. He keeps saying that, and it's definitely a team where if they get 3 goals, they want 4, then they want 5, then they want 6. They just do not stop. And if they win every game from here on out in the league, it will be the best ever Bundesliga season because they'll be level with the points record, but they'll have a better goal difference, definitely, by far. They are a remarkable football team because they keep saying as well, even when they're in a tight spot, we just decided we go out second half, go full gas and see what we could do. Harry Kane's taken on the German phrase, full gas, top gear, effectively. And they did it at Leipzig, you might remember. I was in the stadium for that game. They were absolutely awful in that game and were deservedly a goal down and came back and absolutely battered them in the second half. So, yeah, that hunger is there. And I think that rotation, Andy, probably explains why they look so sharp and so fresh in the DFB Pokal semi-finals in midweek.
Yeah, I mean, they went to Leverkusen and it was 2-0, but let's be honest, they absolutely hammered them. It was a brilliant Bayern performance. Goals from Kane and Luis Diaz in that game, both of whom, of course, had profound effects on Bayern's season. You go into a team that still has a heck of a lot of good players, even though there's been a lot of changes at Leverkusen, and we'll talk about some of their issues in a bit. But Leverkusen didn't feel in that for a second. No. I didn't think. It was remarkable for a semi-final between 2 teams that have been at the very top of the Bundesliga in recent seasons.
If Flecker wasn't amazing, it's 4 or 5-0. He was phenomenal on the night, the goalkeeper.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And, that ties into Leverkusen's performance this weekend, because even though they won, Andy, they won a Rhineland derby away at Köln, by 2-1. I thought they were pretty awful. I was kind of gobsmacked they got out of it. And part of the reason they did get that win was they were given a very questionable penalty.
Very questionable for a handball against Eric Martel of Köln, who put his hands behind his back and leant towards the ball to chest it. It maybe hit him just above the T-shirt arm. So there was no possible justification for giving it. And it was interesting because Robert Hartmann, the referee, was showing the Köln players why he'd given it. And he was sticking his arm out like this, for those of you that can see us on YouTube.
Yes.
Sticking it out as if he was, doing the teapot dance.
It was completely wrong, wasn't it? His assessment of what happened.
at that point, I'm sure the VAR has to step in and say, look, how you've seen it is not how it happened. It felt such a wrong decision. I really felt for Köln because, of course, this is a derby for them, although not a derby they take as like full on as Borussia Mönchengladbach and the historical implications of that. But Köln are battling away at the bottom. They played really well. They created loads of chances. And yet that they couldn't get it over the line, and they're hugely prejudiced by that. And, you know, to add insult to injury, Manuel Schreiber almost saved the penalty, didn't he, from Patrick Schick?
Yeah, it was a dreadful penalty.
Anyway. Yeah, and it was, despite those 2 goals from Schick, very unimpressive performance from Leverkusen. Now, look, we can say that Köln have really improved under René Wagner, and they have, their new coach. But having said that, with the quality that Leverkusen have got, this is a game that they should be going and putting away without too much trouble. And to me, if they manage to get back to the Champions League, which at this point in the season would require a bit of assist, and with 3 games left would maybe even require a minor miracle, it will be despite their performances in 2026 rather than because of... It's only individual quality that's really keeping them in the hunt, isn't it, Kev?
Yeah, and what that then brings you to is what's the situation coaching-wise, because Jesper Hjulmand went in there to replace Erik ten Hag after a handful of games at the start of the season. The way they paint it is he was the guy they wanted in the first place but couldn't get him in the summer because he was still working for the Danish FA. But he isn't convincing anybody at the moment. And there is a lot of talk, Andy, still about guys like Fabian Hutzler potentially being targeted in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, you've got another favourite, haven't you?
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite an interesting shout.
Well, they do have a reputation as a club for thinking outside the box. And they've done that with some of their recruitment. And I think they should be, and maybe are, looking at Matthias Jaissler. Now, he is a guy that had a spell with Salzburg. He wasn't a particularly great player, but he's a very, very young, impressive coach, sharp dresser, but that's beside the point. And he is somebody that's just won back-to-back AFC Champions Leagues with Al Ahly. That is quite the achievement. It really is. To win it once, impressive. To win it 2 seasons in a row, very, very impressive. I think he's sharp. I think he's bright. I think he's somebody who's got great ideas. And that's the kind of guy I think Simon Rolfers, the sporting director, and Leverkusen in general, if they do want to make a change, should be looking at.
I mean, that is the sort of thing that I could imagine them doing, because if you look at the signing of Eki Fernandez, which long-term I think will work out from Alcadia, you know, everyone knew his quality, but maybe he was a bit under the radar because he was out there playing in Saudi, and you know, they didn't hesitate paying what they thought he was worth. I guess there are 2 scenarios for Leverkusen. There's the Champions League scenario and the not Champions League scenario. Yeah. I think either way they'll move Hjulmand on.
Andy, who's your star of the week in Germany?
My star of the week is Aaron Dinkji and the whole of the Heidenheim fan base, actually. I mean, they beat St. Pauli yesterday. You know, that they just will not go down. They've been bottom and doomed for absolutely ages, but they've refused to go down. Another home game where they've thrown a spanner in the works for a team that's battling relegation. Of course, they did that to Union, the game that ended up with Stefan Baumgart being sacked after they won in the last home game. And a brilliant goal to seal it by Aaron Dinkji. And the reason I put him in there is not just because I think he's a great player, but the news about 10 days ago that his partner is seriously ill with leukemia, and they're looking for a bone marrow donor. Heidenheim have had a sort of hunt for bone marrow matches. They've been doing that outside the stadium. His former club Freiburg have done that as well, the club that he's on loan from. And Dinkji's been totally moved by that. That he's able to play at this level when he's going through this trauma in his personal life is amazing. And the way that the Heidenheim fans have responded is pretty fantastic too. And we saw how moved he was at full time.
Yeah, it's been a really lovely reaction to what is obviously a horrible situation for him and his family. My star of the week, Jan Diamande, I know I would name him every week anyway, but I've got a reason for it this time around. The Leipzig winger, gorgeous assist for Riedler Baku's goal. It was the third goal in a 3-1 win for Leipzig against Union Berlin. Marie-Louise Eiter has lost both of her games so far in charge, but of course they weren't doing particularly well before she took charge. Some signs of life from the team, but I do think she's trying to be quite progressive. I'm not entirely sure she's got the players to do it. It has finished at San Siro, Milan 0, Juventus 0. By the way, Stelter did pull a goal back because Borja Iglesias was able to retake his penalty after the first one had been saved. So plenty still to come on Trans-Europe Express.
Darren Bent had his Sound Drive show earlier, suggested a left field option.
I would go for someone, if in that type of concept that Jill Scott's talking about,
Yeah.
I would go for like Igor Thiago from Brentford.
He's been above and beyond.
He has been unbelievable.
How many goals has he got?
I think
I think he's second on the Premier League list.
He's got 21.
I think he's second.
Yeah, he's the first Brentford player to go to 21 Premier League goals because Ivan Toney at 20, Visit at 20, and Mbeumo at 20.
Unbelievable.
Do you know what I mean? And Brentford are now on the cusp of Europe. I know they're 9th right now, but if you look at where they are on the table, I mean, they're only, 2 points over 6th.
Igor Thiago, yeah, he's had a great season.
Yes, he has.
He has, and fair play to the lad. He's got himself in the Brazil squad, and he's a good player.
Yep.
Is that what we're talking about, though? A
No,
Brentford player getting a player of the season?
No, I can't agree with Benty, but he has done unbelievably well, and he's a bit of a throwback. I kind of hope a little bit that what we see with Haaland and Gabriel the other day, where there's that centre half against the centre.
You're listening to Trans-Europe Express on talkSPORT with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell. We're going to talk Serie A now. And the headline for this, Andy, is Ciao Claudio. We will talk about Milan 0, Juventus 0 in just a little while, but we have to go first to the drama of the fight between Claudio Ranieri and Gianpiero Gasperini in the Italian capital. And it seems, Andy, Ranieri is the loser, Gasperini is the winner.
Yeah, which I'm not sure many of us would have predicted going back a little while, because, of course, Claudio Ranieri's got godlike status in Rome as a Roman, and because of the way he turned around last season, taking them from really the edges of a relegation battle to the brink of the Champions League. Didn't quite get there in the end, but I would suggest that's a squad thing. In terms of squad, before we get into this chat about Ranieri and Gasperini, I think you would say they've both had issues that are kind of hangovers from the Mourinho era, and Roma are still paying for the fact that when Mourinho got there in the first summer, he sent out Thiago Pinto and said, "I want all these players," and the squad has had its deficiencies ever since, because it's needed to get younger, and it's needed to shed some high earners along the way, which of course is never easy. Now, is such a strange situation because, of course, the form's not been great of late. So that's seen them drop to the edges of the Champions League race, though results this weekend have changed that a little bit, as we'll discuss in a second, particularly with that Milan-Juventus game playing into this and the fact that it finished 0-0, as you were saying, Kevin. But when last week we were talking about the fact that Ranieri had called out Gasperini and then some before the home game with Atalanta, when he said, well, you can't moan about the recruitment because you had a hand in all of these players that turned up, you signed them all off. And then I think the thing that really pushed Ranieri to the edge of the plank was when he said, we had a top three of candidates and none of them wanted to come, so we got Gasperini instead.
It felt needless, didn't it? That didn't really feel like him, did it? It was quite unbecoming, wasn't it?
No, and I guess that's always the thing with Ranieri is sometimes overlooked because he's such a gentleman in his public persona that he's tough. And he's had to be in pretty much every job that he's been to make things stick and to have real authority, which he's always had. But I think it feels as if we've barely scratched the surface with Gasperini, that, because of everything he's inherited, we're quite a long way from authentic Gasp ball. It feels like that to me, anyway. And I think until you get to the point where you start shifting Paulo Dybala, who's out of contract in the summer and obviously commands significant wages, possibly Lorenzo Pellegrini as well, although they've been tentatively discussing an extension on reduced terms, whether that will still be the case while Ranieri's not there anymore. Now, of course, Ricky Massara, the sporting director, he's expected to go as well. So we're looking at full Gasperini power going ahead. And now in the short term, they kind of got over, or at least partially got over that week of uprooting with winning 2-0 at Bologna, who knocked them out of the Europa League, which is a really damaging defeat for them this week. Daniel Marlin had a huge part in that, and I know you want to talk about him. But with Juventus only drawing tonight, that means all of a sudden they're only 3 points off the top four with 4 games to go, which makes a difference because this season is all about getting in the Champions League.
Yeah, if you look at Marlon, I find him fascinating because I thought it was really interesting that Villa were prepared to let him go. That was the first thing. I think if you look throughout his career, super streaky. When he's hot, he's very hot, and then he can go on these long, cold streaks. But it's a hell of a run. Since he got there midway through the season, he's had 14 games in Serie A, scored 11 goals. And in this game against Bologna, scored the first and made the second. So he's playing exceptionally well. As you mentioned, 2 big hitters in Serie A drew 0-0, Milan and Juventus. Juventus did have a goal ruled out for offside in the first half. Kefren Turam denied. Dusan Vlahovic came very close to scoring actually in stoppage time. Brilliant save from Mike Maignan. But again, it kind of adds to this idea that Milan have just run out of a bit of puff towards the end of the season.
I think the major problem for them is they can't put the ball in the back of the net, Kevin. No, I think that's the main thing for me. Now, you look at what I think that makes it 3 blanks out of the last 5. They scraped a win at Verona last week, who won the worst teams in the division. It took an Adrian Rabiot goal. Essentially, Christian Pulisic, who's meant to lead the team, has stopped scoring. That has been one of the major issues. Not scored since 28th of December.
He started so well, didn't he? Started really well. It's the beard. I blame the beard.
You blame the beard?
It's weighing him down.
I thought that was a reverse thing. If he'd have shaved the beard off, then I'd be on board with you. But look, it's not just him, of course. Rafael Leao, talking of being streaky, has been up and down all this season, much as he has ever since he won the Serie A MVP. Then you look at Christopher Nkunku, who is, they would have been open to selling him in January, just 6 months after shelling out a lot of money to bring him in from Chelsea in the Premier League. Nicholas Füllkrug has been reliably unreliable, I suppose, so far. And they've been looking to sell Santi Jimenez since pretty much the moment they bought him. So for them, it's a massive problem, this result. It's a problem for Juventus as well, because they've got heat on them from Como and Roma as well. But it's a real problem, I think, for Milan, because they're not sure of making the Champions League anymore. So Napoli have broken away a little bit from them with their win 4-0 against Cremonese this weekend. And now you've got the fact that Milan, with 4 games to go, have got Juventus only 4 points behind them and with more momentum, I think it's fair to say.
Inter dropped points, but it didn't matter. 2-2 at Torino. What was remarkable about this, a 17th Serie A assist of the season from Fede Di Marco. That is a record. It's never happened before since they started recording assists. I mean, that's some effort from a wing-back, isn't it?
Yeah, and here's a man who's gaining power as he's losing hair, going back to your previous theory. Look, he's been brilliant this season. And I think it kind of puts the back end of last season in context, really. The fact that Inter looked really weary when they were battling away on all fronts at the end of last season, could have had the treble, ended up with nothing, of course. And DiMarco was a fitness concern for most of the last 2-3 months of last season, and they were patching him up and getting him out there when they could. Now, I do wonder though, Kev, I don't know what you think about this, but so much has gone down their left-hand side because, again, Denzel Dumfries has had a few occasions where he's been unavailable this season, and Luis Enrique, who I've got a lot of time for from his spell at Marseille, has not quite clicked yet. So I just wonder if it's ended up going left by default, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that. And I think as well, because Bastoni tends to break forward quite a lot on that side, obviously DiMarco takes set plays as well. I think that often helps because when you see those wide centre-backs move forward, it does create that uncertainty. It creates that space maybe for DiMarco. So I do think he is an absolutely phenomenal player. Andy, who's your star of the week in Serie A?
My star of the week is going to be Alisson, who has been brilliant since he arrived at Napoli from Sporting. As we said, they won 4-0 against Cremonese on Friday night. He scored a brilliant solo goal, sort of stepping in for his compatriot, David Neres, who's been injured for a lot of this season, one of a number of injuries that Napoli have had. A quick little mention as well for Scott McTominay. Got the opener, helped to set up one of the others with an overhead kick, which, of course, he was saying the one he scored against Denmark, he consistently does higher ones than that in training. I mean, apparently, that's what he says. There's no video evidence of it so far, I believe.
Incredible hang time. My star of the week, Parma's Nesta Elfej, who scored a late winner to seal a 1-0 win for Parma against Pisa. It means that Parma and their 30-year-old coach Carlos Cuesta are safe from relegation. And what I love about Nesta Elfej is that for a long time, he thought he was named after Italian football legend Alessandro Nesta, only to ask his dad and his dad to say, no, nothing to do with that. It's Bob Marley's middle name. That's why you are called Nesta. We've raced through the first hour of Trans-Europe Express.
You found the mask?
Yeah, I found the mask.
It's just who we are, mate.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I hope you lost it.
Why?
What do you mean, why?
Mate, do you know, it's half hot in here. And I can't... So you don't realise what it's like. I've had Arteta on. I'm going to have to take this off, mate. Well, I can't.
No? You what?
Wow, it's hot. I've got to take my top off, mate. I can't keep doing this, mate. I can't keep doing this.
What is going on?
What? What do you mean?
What is this?
What's what?
Is this talkSPORT merch?
What do you mean?
What do you mean? What do you mean? Oh my God, he's got a shirt. You've now got a shirt on. You're killing me. What is this shirt? What is this?
I don't know what you're on about, mate. I just knocked this whole thing up.
So for people who are not watching on YouTube right now, Cundy has got a T-shirt with the Ange mask. I've seen signs encouraging signs. Is this talkSPORT merch? Where are you getting this stuff from? Who is making this stuff for you? It's bang out of order. I'm going to HR. This is not on. Honestly, they're gonna go off the.
Tyson Fury, Floyd Mayweather, Canelo Alvarez. Just hearing these names makes you think money and the hundreds of millions of dollars, pounds or Saudi riyals in boxing. But that's at the top. At the bottom, it isn't quite the same. Even for those on the rise, there's not an awful lot of cash in the boxing world. And if you're just starting out, well, it can be a very costly exercise indeed. But don't take my word for it. Here's the former European champion, talkSPORT's Spencer Oliver.
You're turning professional and you're boxing, let's say, York Hall on a non-televised fight. You have to sell tickets to earn any money, but you have to cover the wages of your opponent as well. So if you don't have the ability to be able to sell enough tickets, you effectively have to pay to fight.
A far cry then from Jake Paul facing Mike Tyson in 2024, when the purse was reported to be around £48 million. But the vast amounts of cash lining the top dog's pockets isn't the norm in a typical fight.
Let's say you're lucky and you get between 5 and 10 grand. You're going to get 10 grand max for that. 10% goes to the trainer, 25% goes to the manager. Then we've got the tax man to pay as well. So we're cutting that money in at least half. So now you've got 5 grand for a 10-week camp. So you're talking about a guy here earning, he might be clearing 500 quid a week. How do you support a family on that? So boxers chase the dream. And, you know, there's probably 2% of them that actually make it.
So say you do make it and you start to rise up the ranks. Strikers Boxing, a training academy, says the mid-tier fighters can earn more, somewhere between £10,000 and £50,000 a fight, depending on record, profile, opponent and popularity of weight class. It's only at the top level does the real cash start flowing in, with the top-tier professionals, i.e. those going for titles, earning 6 figures a fight. Something else you'll have heard of is the terms prize fighter or journeyman. A prize fighter is, as it sounds, someone who picks up fights where they can and gets a nice big check if they win. Journeymen are the fighters who take on up-and-comers, effectively used for experience in the ring. Even if they're going up against the real prospects, a young Anthony Joshua, for example, these guys will be lucky to earn more than 10 grand. So the average boxer isn't as rich as you'd think.
You're listening to Danny Kelly's Trans-Europe Express. Kevin Hatchard sitting in for Danny tonight alongside the European football guru that is Andy Brassell. We've already had plenty packed into the show, a couple of Italian football scandals. We've also looked at the latest from Serie A and indeed the roller coaster ride of Bayern's game against Mainz in the Bundesliga. Plenty to come though. Mbappe watch, Lamine Yamal's season-ending injury, and we'll look ahead to both Champions League semi-finals. It's all coming up on Trans-Europe Express. So we have been keeping an eye on games for you. It finished in La Liga 2-1 to Villarreal against Celta Vigo. So Villarreal pretty much guaranteed a Champions League spot for next season. And Andy, you were keeping an eye on Marseille's progress against Nice. How did that one finish up?
Yeah, that late equaliser for Nice by Elias Way, very, very costly for Marseille, who find themselves stuck in 6th place. So they are 4 points off third and fourth, which are the last automatic and the qualifying Champions League place.
It's been another tricky week in Real Madrid season. It's time for this.
Mbappe, Mbappe, Mbappe! Sa carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappe! Mbappe! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de Kylian Mbappe. Allez, Kylian!
That commentary gets me going every single time. I love that little montage. Great stuff. Andy, it's been another really difficult week for Real Madrid and Kylian Mbappe by extension. Let's start with their first game of the week, because they had a game in midweek and then had another game on Friday. But the first game was a win over Alaves. Okay, they took 3 points. They did not play well, and it's fair to say the natives were somewhat restless.
Yeah, and I think the situation that Real Madrid are living at the Bernabeu is an increasing issue, because it's an issue that's lingered for months, and it's not really connected to the fact that now it's not totally connected to the fact that now they're out of everything. And of course, they've slipped 11 points behind Barcelona at the top with the results this weekend, as we'll come to in the La Liga section. But it was interesting in this game against Alaves, which was their first at home since they've been knocked out of the Champions League, that both Kylian Mbappe at moments and Vinicius Junior, as he has been for months, were booed. And you were pointing out to me a really unusual situation when Vinicius scored what proved to be the winning goal. He sort of like clasped his hands and did a little apology to the crowd in the Bernabeu. And whatever he tries, they're still on his back.
Yeah, it was jaw-dropping, really. And I guess when you widen that out, that's all against the backdrop of the fact that he hasn't yet signed a new contract. And we know that he's out of contract at the end of next season. It was thought that one of the main drivers behind getting rid of Xabi Alonso and replacing him with Alvaro Arbeloa was that they wanted to bring Vinny to the table. They wanted to get him to sign this new deal. Arbeloa's come in and relentlessly talked Vinicius up in the media, no doubt about that. He's regularly picked him. And yet, if he is being booed on a regular basis by the Real Madrid fans, that isn't going to help. It's believed they're still too far apart in terms of the finances and what Vinicius Junior wants. But if we get to the summer and maybe even beyond, it's quite an extraordinary situation for one of the best players in the world to only have a year or maybe even less on his contract.
That is true, although the counterpoint to that is Real Madrid have been here before with Xabi Alonso, the player, with Mesut Ozil, with Angel Di Maria, because the way that Real Madrid negotiate, they know players can get more elsewhere, but they will always take the position of where are you going to go that's better? We're the biggest club in the world, and we give you a great chance of winning the Champions League year after year after year. Now, I guess the issue with that, and there's always been the gap in what Real Madrid want to pay Vinny Junior and what he would like to receive. And, you know, any of us who got pocket money as a kid will sympathise with this.
You got pocket money as a kid? I got ripped off.
But sometimes I didn't get as much as I wanted. It's still pretty cheesed off about it at nearly 50. But like, I think you look at that and you think that is not an insurmountable. Because again, he could use the phantom of the Saudi Pro League for a bit, but they could always just sit there and say, okay, well, if it's money you want, well, we can't match it, go.
Yeah. If
he'd have wanted it, he would have gone. You know, he's had enough opportunities and they could have made a ton of money out of it. So everyone could have been satisfied with that. But I mean, the problem is not, I think, between the club and Vinicius, because of the relationship between Florentino Perez and Vinicius, which has always been pretty close. Maybe you could argue that has been slightly changed by the fact that Florentino also brought in Kylian Mbappe, which is, I don't think it's insurmountable from a tactical point of view, but I think it's close to insurmountable from an ego point of view. I think the main issue, though, is, as you say, the atmosphere at the Bernabeu. And I think when you look at Real Madrid on a global basis, it's quite easy to forget what an effect a massive crowd being on your back all the time. And bear in mind that Cristiano Ronaldo got booed once every 2 years when they were unhappy. And he had a massive strop about it. Now, everything that...
That's not like him. He's usually so measured and calm.
Very unusual. But everything that Vinny Jr. has done has been to try and bring a bit of peace to the situation. And it's just not worked, because all those fans just remember that he was the guy who helped get rid of Xabi Alonso. And long term, that is not going to make Real Madrid more competitive. I think that is a huge issue. And those match-going fans are not daft. They know exactly what they've seen. And it all goes back to when he had that strop with Xabi Alonso, when he got taken off in El Clasico, a game that they won, by the way, going back to October. And Vinicius apologised to everyone apart from Xabi Alonso afterwards. Yeah. And the fact that the club didn't back him really set a time limit on how long Alonso could last. You know, if you think it's about the results, well, you know, Alvaro Arbeloa probably would have lasted a fortnight if it was strictly about the results, wouldn't it? Yeah. Because you look at the teams he's lost to, it's remarkable for a Real Madrid side in anything other than a crisis season, and particularly with a group of players like they've got. I find it hard to see how they can resolve this in the short term. And if that anger is spreading from those fans to Kylian Mbappe, I think that's hugely damaging for their short and medium term.
I know it is Mbappe watch. We will come to Mbappe, who did not last the 90 minutes against Betis in the second game they played this week. But there is another Vinicius story, Andy, because Gianluca Prestiani, who Vinicius accused of racially abusing him when Real Madrid played Benfica in the Champions League, there has been a resolution of sorts to that situation.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's one that any of the parties has been satisfied by. Because you look at the headline, it's a 6-match ban for Prestiani, and 3 of them are suspended. And of course, he's already served one because he was kept out of the return game,
leg. Yeah.
Which if Benfica had had any sense, they would have left him out anyway. And so essentially he's got a 2-match ban in next season's Champions League, which is so far from satisfactory. Now, of course, Prestiani's indignant and saying he didn't do it. Well, I think we know he did. And secondly, like from Vinicius' situation and Real Madrid's situation, and this is the backdrop of any criticism of Vinicius Junior, is that everything that he's suffered in Spain in terms of away fans and the racial abuse that he's suffered, and then this. I mean, the most depressing part of this whole Prestiani thing is the fact that Vinicius knew exactly how to react because he'd suffered it 25 times before. That is really the worst part of it.
And the other part as well is that the conclusion they have come to is homophobic abuse rather than racist abuse. That's the conclusion that UEFA have drawn, because that was part of Prestiani's evidence, wasn't it? So, a very, very tricky situation, which I agree with you. I don't think it's been satisfactorily sorted out for any of the parties, really. I do want to get onto this draw for Real Madrid at Betis. They conceded a really, really late equaliser, and that's seen them lose further ground in the La Liga title race. Just as concerning may be the fact that Kylian Mbappe went off late on.
Yeah, and there's been a sense that they've been semi-managing this knee injury for a while. Now, of course, it goes back to when it was misdiagnosed, just as they misdiagnosed the Camavinga injury around the same time as well. It looks like he's still able to compete at a good level. But I just wonder how the dynamic of the rest of the season works now. Because if there's any doubt over Mbappe's 100% fitness, why is he going to want to play in the games?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying necessarily he's going to say to Real Madrid, right, I'm not playing. But he might be nudging them in that direction. Because for him, playing in the World Cup, captaining France there, trying to win a second World Cup, trying to get to a third final, is everything. And Real Madrid essentially have nothing to play for. Again, they weren't great I thought of Betis on Friday night. Betis played better in snatching a draw in that than they played at Girona on Tuesday night in winning a game that I went to. And, you know, maybe in future they'll know this as their Hector Bellerin game because, of course, he equalised in the last knockings, and that was the least that Betis deserved in that. But you have to ask, apart from personal pride, when it comes to preserving yourself for the World Cup, what is there left in this season for Kylian Mbappe in the remaining, three and a half weeks?
Yeah, and part of that picture is the fact that it seems highly unlikely that Alvaro Arbeloa will keep the coach's role, and therefore the conversation turns to who might come in. I saw the Stuttgart coach, Sebastian Hoeneß, linked with the role. Now, this is my take on that. He is a super intelligent coach. I think he's a great tactician. I think he plays lovely football. I think that dressing room would eat him alive. I don't think he'd be able to get his ideas across effectively. I think he'd last an even shorter time than Xabi Alonso. Maybe I'm doing him a disservice, but my genuine feeling is this is a guy that needs a captive audience. If you look at Stuttgart, he's improved some guys who'd been kind of mid-range, in some cases mediocre players, got absolutely the most out of them. And in terms of young players, he has developed them really well. But for me, for Real Madrid, he's absolutely not the right man. We are going to talk La Liga after the break right here on Trans-Europe Express.
Cole Palmer, he hasn't turned up all season. I said this yesterday. If you were naming the England squad today, Eze, Gibbs-White and Morgan Rogers miles ahead of Cole Palmer. 22 appearances this season in the Premier League, only 9 goals, 1 assist, and his last goal was the 4th of March against Aston Villa. He's not turned up. And when there's a game where a manager needs one of his top players against Brighton, he's in the stands. What did the physio who picked the team under Maresca say? You know, you've got a 10% chance of getting injured, Cole. Take it easy against Brighton. Go and sit in the stand. Like, we come for the players like Cucurella, Enzo Fernandez, Garnacho maybe, but let's look closer to home as well. For me, Cole Palmer this season been a disappointment.
Not just this season, actually. If you look at his form in the second half of last season, this is a decline that's been going on for a long time.
He won the Club World Cup final single-handedly.
He turned up for that.
He turned the Conference League final on its head after half.
What about in the Premier League the second half of last season?
Well, he played more games than anybody else, and he was certainly Chelsea's best player over the course of the season.
This season, though, he's not been good enough. When you look at
he's been struggling with a groin injury, and if you speak to Thomas Tuchel, he'll tell you that he couldn't run properly for the first half of the season.
But you look at your Maverick players like Cole Palmer. He's earning a lot of money, long-term contract, paid a good fee for him. He's not done enough, and
You are listening to Trans-Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell. We've talked about Real Madrid's struggles this week, and we're going to look at La Liga. The headline is Lamin's lament, because, Andy, even though Barcelona have had a good week results-wise, they've had some really bad news. Lamine Yamal ruled out for the rest of the club season, and you were actually there when it happened.
Yeah, that's right. He scored the winning goal against Celta on Wednesday night from the penalty spot. And when he put in the penalty and went down immediately afterwards, I thought it was part of the celebration. You know, you don't really expect an 18-year-old to badly injure his hamstring while taking a penalty. Obviously, we could get into the whole discussion about how much football he's played at that age, which is kind of remarkable. I mean, it's impossible not to lean heavily on a player of that sort of exceptional ability. I think it's fair to say, in the defence of his coaches at club and national level.
It is a problem, though, Andy, isn't it? He's played more minutes than anyone at Barcelona. That's including Joan Garcia, who's the first-choice goalkeeper. And I think about Pedri, I think about Gavi. These are kids, or kids at the time. I know they're a little bit older now, but they were run into the ground by Barcelona and Spain because they needed them, because these are guys that we can't do without. And Barcelona weren't going to back down. Spain weren't going to back down. And we are where we are. Gavi's had a couple of serious injuries. Pedri's had a big chunk of time where he was out. And I just fear Lamin's going to be the same, because the truth is, he is an exceptional talent that Hansi Flick and Luis de la Fuente want in their teams.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And he is irreplaceable already, you know, at the age that he is. There's no doubt about that. Of course, he'll continue to attract heavy attention from defenders as well. So we're not just talking about muscle injuries, we're talking about contact injuries as well. But I just wonder if we're entering a generation of players who are going to peak and finish earlier, to be honest. At this point in time, it's quite difficult for me to imagine Lamine Yamal and Jude Bellingham, for example, who are a few years apart, but nevertheless are broadly the same generation. I don't know about you. It's hard for me to imagine them playing until they're like 38, 39.
Yeah.
To be
Vinicius
honest.
as well. We talked about Vinicius earlier. He's got so many miles on the clock. When you think how many games he's played, how many minutes for Brazil and for Real Madrid, and high level as well.
You'd think twice, wouldn't you? I mean, you know, there's no doubt about it. But it was an interesting situation with Lamine. So he goes down, and immediately his teammates, it becomes clear that it is a serious injury against Celta, because his teammates, a few of them, like look over to the bench and do the "let's make a change" sign with their hands and their pointy fingers, and then a medic and a doctor, a suited doctor, run on, but not towards Lamine Yamal, because there's a medical emergency in the crowd at Camp Nou, and the doctor and the medic are dealing with that. So Lamine limps off and is replaced by Rooney, while like half of the rest of the stadium is just looking at what's happening in this stand, and the game's delayed for 20 minutes with the team warming up on the pitch, and you know it sort of slightly flattened the atmosphere afterwards, as I'm sure you can imagine. Barcelona had to hang on a little bit to sort of see it out, and I think in the circumstances they did so well, because the last match you want after that is Getafe away, where the ball's hardly in play, where they're going to disrupt your game like no one else really in La Liga, and you're going to get kicked. And actually, I think the freshness, repeatedly, and I think the freshness of Fermin, who didn't start coming in and scored the opening goal, Lewandowski and Marcus Rashford, who was really great. Lewandowski set up the second goal for him as well. And when going back to the Lamine Yamal question, actually, Kevin, I think it's interesting, because this is something that Deco and Barcelona's sporting directorship saw before the start of the season, because they said, what's your big plan for the transfer market? And he said, well, cover for Rafinha and for Lamine Yamal. And they've needed both of them, really, haven't they? They've needed cover for both of them. And in that context, Rashford has done such a good job knowing the role and doing it quite selflessly. Honestly, there's been speculation in some areas that they're not going to keep him, at least not on current conditions of purchase. But look,
that's all part of the dance, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah, Barcelona wouldn't be doing their job if they weren't trying to drive the price down. For me, he's done a tremendous job for them. Marcus Rashford, really, really selfless, really knowing the role, and he's part of the reason that they are where they are in the league.
Yeah, Hansi Flick, a big fan as well, and of course he has a big say as coach. We're just going to revel in the chaos of this game, Andy. Rayo Vallecano 3, Real Sociedad 3. The scoreline doesn't begin to tell the story.
Well, no, it doesn't. And, we'll come to Rayo as well. I guess we'll touch on them in the Conference League. But what an incredible season they're having. So, as most other weeks, they're playing a team who's much better funded than them. They go a goal down, they get themselves level, they go down a second time. And you think they've got a second equaliser through Pedro Diaz. But the referee is called to have a look by VAR. Jose Luis Guzman, the referee, is called over to look at by VAR. A potential foul at the other end by Andrea Ratu, their brilliant right back. It's not a foul, it's a clean tackle.
Yeah.
But after something like 6 minutes of looking at it, he chalks off the Pedro Diaz goal, gives a penalty, and is scored, of course, by Mikel Oyarzabal because he scores all the penalties. And they're 3-1 down. And there are a number of incidents after this. So Raul Martin Presa, the president of Rayo, the very controversial president of Rayo, has a row in the director's box with Real Sociedad directors. You have Fran Soto, who, like Rocky that we're talking about at the top of the show, is the director of refereeing in Spain. A couple of fans spot him and start having a go at him, so he has to leave. Isi Palazon, their star player, who's been substituted in the closing stages, has a go at the referee and calls him a scoundrel. So he's
I love
he's
that.
carded from the
That's
bench.
a brilliant word to use, isn't it? Scoundrel.
It really is. It's Empire Strikes Back-esque, isn't it, Kevin?
Bit of Princess Leia lexicon, nothing wrong with that. But that's the kind of thing you'd say if you were going to throw your glove at somebody and challenge them to a duel, isn't it? You scoundrel.
It's good old bring back Bridgerton. And
yes.
I don't know. It's funny though, but based on the intonation of it, he will either get a small ban or a really long ban. Like it's not like out of the question that he could be out for the rest of the season. Keep him fresh for the Conference League,
exactly, I suppose. That's what I was thinking.
They're almost clear of relegation. But, Rayo have had so many problems this season on and off the field. And in this situation, like, people lose their nerves, as we saw in this occasion, but they definitely don't come back from that when they're 3-1 down. And they came back. They got a 3-3 draw. Alan Mao scoring a header in the 9th minute of stoppage time. And it's just an incredible result for them. What they're able to do week after week after week against the odds on meagre resources is quite astonishing.
Another thing that's quite astonishing this season across Europe is some pretty big hitters in real relegation danger. I think of Tottenham in England, I think of Wolfsburg in Germany, well-funded, well-resourced clubs who are in real danger of going. Now, Sevilla don't quite fit into that category financially because, of course, they've made a real mess of their transfers in recent years and what have you, and they haven't been able to sell on players as well as they have done, but they're in a massive mess at the moment.
Yeah, so 5 games to go, and they lost again at Osasuna today, which is a really difficult place to go at the best of times. They're 1-0 up, and then they conceded 2 goals in the closing stages, including a 99th minute winner, and it had been coming because Odysseas Flakorimos, a player who they can't really afford, and they can't afford to keep long term, even if they do stay up, has been brilliant on loan from Newcastle. He saved them a couple of times in stoppage time and then couldn't sustainably save them. And so if you look at what happened above them, fortunately, Alaves and Mallorca were playing each other, so not both of them could win this weekend. But you're wondering where Sevilla go from here. They've already changed the coach, and since he's come in, Luis Garcia Plaza has made no real difference to them and where they are. Clearly, it's not really a coaching issue.
Yeah, it feels like a big error, that, doesn't it, making the change when they did?
It does. Look, if you can get someone better than Matias Almeida, great. But I don't think they could.
Yeah.
No, they didn't. And I think people saw them beating Barcelona in the early weeks of the season, and people who look at it casually, but massively overrated how good Sevilla are. They're not a good side. As you say, Kevin, they've been circling the drain for a really long time. And given that they've won, 6 Europa Leagues this century. For them to go down, even though it's been heading that way for a while, and their fans have been saying, look what's happening here for a good few years, I think it would be a shock to a lot of people.
Yeah, let's talk about the relegation battle in the Segunda as well, because you have a tale for us from there of an absolutely crazy game.
Yeah, I do. And it was a strange old business. You had a game between Huesca, who've been in top flight fairly recently, and Real Zaragoza, who were managed by Gabi, the former captain of Atletico Madrid at the start of this season. It was won by Huesca, pushing Zaragoza closer to the drop. Now, if we're talking about relegations that would be ruinous, this would really be it for Real Zaragoza. Bear in mind, going back 30 years, and they won the Winners' Cup against Arsenal. They're a team, a club of stature, and it really popped off at the end. I think that the nerves of a relegation battle, and you look at Esteban Andrada, the goalkeeper, being one of 2 players who got sent off. And it's after he chased an opponent round the pitch and hit him.
Yeah, it's quite something, really. I've seen it. It's quite something.
I'm assuming we're not going to see any of him for the rest of the season. But look, Zaragoza have been in a state for a while as well. And the thing, of course, we have to bear in mind is if you get relegated from the 2nd tier of Spanish football, finishing top of the 3rd tier doesn't guarantee you going up. It's regionalised. There are a lot of parallel leagues, despite the reform of the 3rd tier recently. It's super hard to get out of. And we've seen big clubs get stuck in there, like Deportivo La Coruña, spent 3-4 years down there as well. Of course, former Champions League semi-finalists and La Liga champions themselves in this century. So, yeah, sad days for Real Zaragoza, who's still a very well-supported club.
My star of the week is West Ham legend Tony Martinez. Scored twice in a 2-1 win for Alaves against Mallorca. Andy, who's yours?
It was a tough choice in the end, but I think I've got to go for.
It is a tough choice.
It is. It's got to be. I think it's got to be Nicolas Pepe, actually, because of course so criticised when he was at Arsenal. Winner for Villarreal against Celta tonight, which pretty much seals their progression in the Champions League as well. Got to have a little word for Alex Sorloth as well. 2 goals for him as Atletico Madrid ended their rubbish recent run by beating Athletic.
He snuck in 2 stars of the week, but I will let him off. Rest of the hour is going to be our look ahead to the Champions League semi-finals. They are enormous games coming up for you, and we're going to look ahead to those on Trans Europe Express.
I've been saying this all season. They don't want to get rid of Arne Slot. Other media outlets are now reporting that he's going to stay come what may, particularly as they look like they're going to get
what you've been saying
all along.
Yeah, but what I was going to say, when you've got this much upheaval, do you really want to add a change of manager into the mix as well? Particularly when you've got a manager who did win the Premier League last year. Well, he's not useless, is he, Arne Slot?
I think he deserves another go at it. But when he comes out and says we need to sell players, I don't think that's right, is it?
That's always been the Liverpool way. These are not owners who...
FSG don't spend loads of money. They don't just lavish loads of cash.
Who in that squad, though, is going to bring in a lot of money? Who's going to bring in a lot of money in that
Jones will bring you 20 million quid.
Okay, who else?
Alexis McAllister, potentially. Not had a great season. Bit of interest from Real Madrid, I'm hearing.
Alisson, did they cash in on Alisson?
Well, he spoke about him today, actually, and he said that he doesn't respond to rumours.
I think he'll stay.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well,
Mamardashvili's not proved himself to be ready yet.
No, not quite yet. Let's just say that. 03717223344. By the way, Arne Slot staying.
The latest episode of How to Win the World Cup is now live. Matt Ford and Alex Brooker speak to the former Portugal defender and Euro 2016 winner Jose Fonte all about Portugal and in particular Cristiano Ronaldo ahead of the great man's 6th World Cup this summer. That's the How to Win the World Cup podcast, available right now on the talkSPORT app or your favourite podcast provider. It is a massive week of Champions League action. We have you covered on the talkSPORT network. On talkSPORT on Tuesday, live commentary of PSG against Bayern Munich. Joe Shannon will be your commentator alongside the former England captain Stuart Pearce. And on Wednesday, Arsenal's trip to Atletico Madrid will have every kick of that as well. Jim Proudfoot alongside the former England striker Darren Bent. In the next section, we're going to take a look at the game between PSG and Bayern. And Andy Brassell, there is an argument to say, and many people are making this argument, this really could be and should be the final.
I mean, it would have been wonderful, wouldn't it, really? A one-off between these two who I think it's hard to argue they're not the best two teams in Europe, particularly on absolute current form with the way it's gone for Arsenal in recent weeks. And of course, we'll come to them in a bit.
That's the key, Andy. That's the key. If you'd have asked me it after the league phase, I'd have said the top two genuinely are your top two, Arsenal and Bayern. Arsenal have beaten Bayern in the league phase and it looked really good. But since then, it does feel like these two have gone past them.
Yeah, and I think if we focus on PSG first, I mean, they've been in a very competitive Liga race this season, which is at least partly to do with the fact that they've played so many games that there has been a dip at various points, both in terms of consistency and actual fitness. But I think we all know how well resourced PSG are. We also know how they don't pay quite as much as they used to, and they're in a post-superstar world, post Neymar, Messi, Mbappe, Donnarumma. But I think when you put it in the context, what they've been able to do this season in the Champions League and the point they've been able to get at is remarkable, actually, that they've been able to get themselves to this point without having quite the same revelatory raw energy that they did at this point. But I think the way that they've dealt with the knockouts so far has been excellent. They've done really well. They've ridden out a few wobbles, just as they did last year. But last year they had Gigi Donnarumma to help them out the bad bits, and they've got two goalkeepers who are nowhere near his standard at the moment, certainly in terms of shot stopping. But I think the biggest relief, Kev, for Luis Enrique will be the news that they've got a fully fit squad to go into this game. So Vitinha, who looked like he might be in a bit of trouble when he limped off against Lyon this time last week, of course, removed his boot in the tunnel, as we relayed at the time. He's going to be fit for it as well, which is huge.
Yeah, it is. And I think on the Bayern side of things, I find it really interesting the journey they've been on with Vincent Kompany, because Max Eberl, the senior sporting director, who was instrumental in bringing him to the club in the first place, made the point, and he's been very open about this, and the club have been very open about this, Kompany was not the first choice. He wasn't even number 2, 3 or 4. They had a number of coaches that they looked at. Xabi Alonso was probably their top choice. That didn't work out. They thought about trying to bring back Julian Nagelsmann, maybe. They flirted with the idea of bringing in Ralf Rangnick. They went to speak to Palace about Oliver Glasner, but the compo was too expensive. But Abel always had this idea in his head that Kompany, having played the kind of football that he played at Burnley in the promotion season, not the relegation season, but he was really intrigued by, could this work with better players at his disposal? That was the gamble. I think they felt he was a guy that had the gravitas, because Bayern, like Real Madrid, and like to an extent, I'm sure PSG, is a medals on the table dressing room. And I think if you can say, well, I won this, I did this, I was this kind of player, that goes a long way. But I think the most important thing Kompany has done, and we can talk about all the goals they score, we can talk about the flowing football they play. I think he has got this squad united and excited about the football they play. The work rate is phenomenal without the ball. It really is. And that is the big change, because for me, at the end of last season, he looked at it and thought, right, we've had some really bad results away from home. We didn't go as far in the Champions League as we wanted. How can we change it? And I think the two big changes are they're more aggressive without the ball. So they're doubling down on that part. And I think at times they're able to take a breather by keeping possession. Now, Andy, I reckon the challenge here is against one of the best possession teams on the planet. How are you going to be able to do that? Can you bring that press to bear? And can you keep the ball when you have the chance?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the answer to that, Kev, is I guess Bayern are going to back themselves to be a bit more physically durable than PSG.
Yeah.
With everything that PSG have been through this year. Now, look, I think the fact that they were able, in this 3-0 win over Angers yesterday, which all but sealed the title for them, that they were able to leave Doué, Dembélé, Kvaratskhelia on the bench. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, really, in terms of this stage in the season where you've got games that you've got to go and win, to leave out three of your most important players so they'll be fresher. Not fresh, but fresher, I think is very important going into to this game. One little issue for them is Achraf Hakimi came off with an injury. Now, that is a player who they have no replacement for. Now, clearly, I think there's another issue with Achraf Hakimi that tends to be a bit glossed over at the moment, in that he's facing serious criminal charges that if he played for a Premier League team, well, he wouldn't be playing at the moment, would he? Let's be fair. So I always think if there's one little weakness in PSG, it's that they've got a player who's so vital to the way they play, who they must have, they've known this situation has been around for what, the best part of 2 years. And Luis Enrique has always said, well, look, I don't need a replacement for him. I couldn't get a replacement as good as him. I mean, that to me is not really a reason for not having backup. I mean, you look at Warren Zaire-Emery, who's played more league minutes than anyone else this season. They played him in midfield, right back and left back. That is not a sustainable solution from my point of view. I realise you can't get another Achraf Hakimi, but I think they've been a little bit negligent in not dealing with this. Whether he makes it or not in a football sense is important, because, of course, Luis Diaz, we've talked so much about Kane and Elise. I feel that as if Luis Diaz has almost been underrated this season for the extra dimension, really, that he has provided Bayern with. But I wanted to go back on your point about Vincent Kompany, and I'd agree with all of that, by the way. But I think when it comes to these biggest matches, and especially at this point of the season when the players have played so much, I think it's worth underlining what the atmosphere at Bayern has become like under Vincent Kompany, because this is really a club that specialises in drama, whereas he's taken all that out of it, which I think is really important. So I think maybe we're moving away from coaches like Mourinho, Conte, Simeone, because I think tired players just aren't going to have that, really, as the demands go up and up and up. Whereas Kompany, it's clear it's all about calm and respect. And I think that's really important at this point of the season.
They enjoy it. You listen to them speak, They're absolutely loving it. And even things like those title celebrations that we talked about last weekend, and you have the cockatoo that they'd taken from the restaurant as part of last season's title celebrations. Now, that might seem like a silly little thing, but an ex-player made a point to me, actually, recently. What that comes from is enjoying being together and spending time together. And those kind of anecdotes, those kind of silly things bond a team together, even though you might not think it's that important. And I think you're absolutely right. This is a club that was called FC Hollywood for years because you'd have players falling out with each other, players falling out with the coach, players kicking off in public. That doesn't happen now. That it just doesn't happen. There aren't those kind of egos butting heads. They're all united, and the common goal is they want that treble. They absolutely want that treble. They think they can get it. They've got the league. They think they can get the Pokal. They're in the final now against Stuttgart, which I think will be a great game. And they believe they can win this Champions League. So they've really, really moved on under Kompany. Any idea early on who you might think might nick the first leg?
Oh, this is so difficult because it should be the final, Kev. It is so difficult.
I've Paxman'd you.
Yeah, you have. Answer the question. I think the first leg will be a draw, and I think Bayern will take the tie.
Yes, I agree. I think Bayern are going through, regardless of what happens. And of course, Bayern have already beaten them in the league phase, and they won away from home, which I think is really significant.
Look, if this is anything like, we were talking about this could have been the final, like into Barcelona last year. If it's anything like that semi-final, we're in for something, aren't we?
If it's not like that semi-final, I will be bitterly disappointed. I think it's going to be a belter. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about Atletico Madrid against Arsenal on Trans Europe Express.
The big news is that Liam Rosenior has been sacked by Chelsea after 5 straight Premier League losses in which Chelsea didn't score a single goal. That's their worst record since 1912. Now, Chelsea would have preferred Rosenior to stay and be judged in years rather than weeks, but it simply wasn't possible. And as a consequence, a mid-season change is needed. Even though Rosenior only got the job in January, what I can tell you is that the players have already been informed. They were off today, and Callum McFarland will take charge of the team until the end of the season on an interim basis. And that includes the weekend's FA Cup semi-final against Leeds United at Wembley. And then Chelsea in the summer will do a thorough process to replace Rosenior, but they're going to take their time with that. So Rosenior sacked after that loss to Brighton, arguably Chelsea's worst performance in many, many years. And it is an interim manager in Callum McFarland to take charge until the end of the season.
Ben, firstly, well done on breaking the news. I'm looking at all the other media outlets. We've got it before everyone. So I really appreciate you telling talkSPORT first. Why the big change of heart? Because it wasn't that long ago the owners came out and almost confirmed the fact that they were going to stick with their manager.
Listening to Trans Europe Express, and we're going to have a look at that semi-final between Atletico Madrid and Arsenal in the Champions League. We'll have live commentary for you on Wednesday of that game in the Spanish capital. That'll be on talkSPORT. Andy, this is a really intriguing game because people will look at the league phase. Arsenal won the game comfortably, but the truth is at 0-0, Atletico looked good and had a couple of big chances.
Yeah, they did. They had some huge chances in that game. I thought they were really good for the first hour. But I think there are a few things that have changed since then. I think that game was a really good example, just like the Bayern game at the Emirates, in which, we were talking about, you were talking about the fact that Arsenal and Bayern were undoubtedly the two best teams in Europe at the point where we'd finished the league phase. At that point, and at the point where they played both Bayern and Atletico in London, I think Arsenal needed 20, 25 minutes to really tear a team apart. And that's exactly what they did to Atletico on that night at the Emirates. It was ruthless. It was awesome, really. And I think it's clear that for whatever reason, and that's not to say that Arsenal can't get a result over these two legs, they're not in that place at the moment. Now, having said that, I think Atletico have their vulnerabilities as well. One of those vulnerabilities is the fact that Diego Simeone has found his best 11. And that means he's probably playing it a little bit too often. Now, he's tried to come away from that in recent weeks, but that's why, until we got to yesterday's game, against Athletic, that they'd lost 7 games in 8. Because really, for a lot of these games, and of course there are a few red herrings in there. You look at the Tottenham game, for example, where they'd won handsomely in the first leg. So that's a loss on paper, but does it really count for anything? But because they've been secure as can be in the top 4 of La Liga for a very, very long time, and of course at the moment Spain is on course to get the 5th Champions League place as well, which looks like it's going to go to Betis as stands. There's really been no motivation for Simeone to play his best team for quite a while. Now, I wonder if this creates a bit of a 2-tier system in the squad, Kevin, because I think when there are players who know who's being relied on for the big matches, you've seen them come in and look like sloppy and not sharp. In the game they lost at Elche in the week, which was conditioned by the Thiago Almada red card, but even that really was an example of a player who's out of form, didn't really have his brain quite switched on. And we know what a great player Almada is, but he hasn't really panned out as planned for Atletico so far, because it was thought that him and Julian Alvarez would be running the team. Sorloth scored 2 yesterday. He knows he's not going to start in this game on Wednesday night in Madrid at the Metropolitano. So look, there's a lot to recommend Atletico as worthy opponents in this, but I would say for every problem that Arsenal have, they have a problem themselves.
I think what's really intriguing about this as well is that some people, probably not regular listeners to this show, if I'm honest, because they would know, regular listeners to the show, how this Atleti team has developed. But I think the initial response was, oh, wow, that's going to be 2 teams digging in, trying to play for a 1-0. That is not Atletico in the current vintage at all.
No, it's not. And
they're not capable of playing that way anymore, I don't think. I don't think they've got the personnel for it.
They're not. And well, on the other hand, we've seen that they can dig in at least. We know that they're not as defensively solid as they were in 2014 or even 2016. They've evolved a lot from there. But we know that they're a team that does have fight. Having said that, they're also a team, and we've seen it time and time again. We saw it in the 2 legs against Barcelona in particular. They're a team that are a bit more clinical than they once were as well, which I think in terms of Arsenal being nervous and making mistakes, as has been the case in recent games, that is the bit that could be costly to Arsenal. Because you look at the fact that they will start with Griezmann and Alvarez up front. There's no doubt about that. Now, Griezmann, Alvarez, they rested him yesterday. Griezmann played an hour, scored, and then got taken off, which he can't really do much more than an hour these days, to be honest. And You know, he's 35. It's one of the reasons he's going to MLS, because he will do 120 minutes worth of running in that hour.
That's the key, isn't it? Because his work rate is still phenomenal. And even when Diego Simeone was giving him his flowers in this press conference and saying what an incredible friend he is, what an incredible player he's been, he still said, slightly jokingly, but I'm not sure he was joking, if you don't run, you're out the team.
That's right. But I think what Griezmann's got to add to that is he's one of the smartest footballers in Europe still. So even if he's not the guy who starts for Atletico all the time now, even if he's not their most important player anymore, they're going to need to replace him next season. There's no doubt about that. And it's not easy to find someone like that. At one point, we talked about it before on here, we thought it would be Julian Alvarez, but even if it's destined to be Julian Alvarez's team going forward, he can't do everything that Griezmann can do. And I think if you look at the sort of Indian summer bit of his career, so much of a part of that is the way that he played in the 2022 World Cup. And Atletico have lent on him in a different way, not just for his energy, not just for his goals, but for his craft. And I think in a game like this, with the defensive rigour and physicality that Arsenal have, that's going to be massively important to them.
Yeah, Arsenal, I still do believe, are probably the best organised team without the ball around. I think they're the best defensive team in the competition. It's that old American adage, isn't it? Defence wins championships. That gives them a chance in every single game, doesn't it? Because even if they don't have the rhythm and attack that they have had, they still can negotiate their way through a tie.
Yeah, they can. And that's it. It's about results at this stage. And I think really the fact that Arsenal have come back into the Champions League after that 6-year absence and made an enormous impact. You know, the fact that they were disappointed about the way that they went out in that first year back to Bayern in the quarterfinals just shows you how big their ambitions have been for a long time, that they had their chances in the second leg against PSG, who are undoubtedly the best team in Europe last season, but Arsenal gave themselves a chance in that tie, particularly in the first 25 minutes of the return leg in Paris. So look, they know it's about getting the results, nothing else. And I guess that's it. When it comes down to figuring out what will happen in this, neither of these teams have to play well to get to the final. I think that's the interesting thing about it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how it goes. It's going to be quite tight, I think. I'll be really intrigued to see how Arsenal set up. Of course, they keep picking up injuries at the moment. That isn't helping them in terms of their rhythm. We have got you covered for these two semi-finals on the talkSPORT network. On Tuesday on talkSPORT, we will bring you the first leg of that tie between PSG and Bayern. And on Wednesday, we've got that game from Madrid for you. We'll bring you every kick of Atletico against Arsenal. We have flown through the first 2 hours of this show right here on Trans Europe Express.
It's expensive as well, living in Paris, by the sounds of it, Emmanuel. It's expensive being Emmanuel Petit, by the sounds of it, as well.
No, so happy to be Emmanuel Petit, you know.
Oh, quite right.
If I was not Emmanuel Petit, I wish I would be. I could be Emmanuel Petit. Honestly, my life is beautiful.
Well, let's get into this. What do you like about him?
Well, I always do what I like, I don't do things because I don't want to do it. And this is a luxury, especially nowadays. People would think, okay, with the money you earn, but I gave everything to my ex-wives. I had 3 divorces and I gave the half of it to the States too. So, but I'm still very happy. I try, every single morning when I wake up, I want to stay positive because life is beautiful. I know it's very difficult, but if you want things to change in your life, you have to be positive. This is my religion.
Coming on this show often might change that.
Well, I was going to say,
if I have to come every single day with Simon, maybe I will change that amount.
Don't blame me. I'm positive.
More green jackets have been lost at the 12th than at the Augusta City Dry Cleaners. Rory McIlroy knows this better than most. But what is Amen Corner and why is it so iconic? The famous sequence has always been there since the Masters began in 1934. It didn't get its name until '58, though, when American sports writer Herbert Warren Wind, on the left, wrote, "At the farthest reach of the Augusta National Course, down in the Amen Corner." He drew inspiration from the 1933 jazz song Shouting in That Amen Corner by the Dorsey Brothers. The reason behind its difficulty is all in the sand and the water. Tournament officials don't even bother to count the balls lost in there each year, such is the sheer number. The 11th, named White Dogwood, is a downhill 520-yard par 4 with a pond to the left of the green and a bunker to the right. Both cause a lot of trouble each year. The 12th, Golden Bell, is perhaps the most famous hole in the world, with danger everywhere. Many aim for the flag, but look, get it even slightly wrong, and you're in the azaleas at the back, or the bunkers at the front, or even worse, Rays Creek. Or you can play it safe and aim for the open green on the left. You chicken. Tiger Woods once said, if you make 4 bogeys from Thursday to Sunday, you're doing well. And the highest ever score on that hole? 13. It's a par 3. Tom Weiskopf in 1980 was the sorry soul. Often the iconic Ben Hogan Bridge is the only thing players enjoy about Golden Bell. Even if you escape there unscathed, though, you met with Azalea, the dogleg par 5 13th. It tempts players to go for the green in 2, but cut over those trees on the left at your peril. Every year, it seems, Amen Corner destroys someone's dreams. Rory McIlroy dropped 3 shots through here as his round unravelled in 2011. In 2016, a year after navigating Amen Corner expertly, Jordan Spieth shot a quadruple bogey on the 12th to throw away his green jacket. I mean, it sounds like my game, to be honest. So who'll be the next to be brought to their knees, praying for mercy after Amen Corner?
You are listening to Trans-Europe Express. Kevin Hatchard sitting in for Danny Kelly tonight alongside the European football expert Andy Brassell. Plenty to come in the final hour. We'll get the latest from South America with Tim Vickery. We're going to update you on all matters Liga. We'll look ahead to the semi-finals of the Europa League and the Conference League, and we'll go around the leagues. The Trans-Europe Express is speeding along, and you're all very welcome. Right, time to get into the Learjet. We're going to head to South America, and we're going to link up with Tim Vickery. Tim, great to have you with us once again. Pleased with the Tottenham win. I know everybody else won, but that must be a relief at least.
Yeah, it's a little bit like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic at this stage, isn't it? So as it turned out, it didn't do a lot of good, but at least a win. The habit of winning. So all right, puts him in a little better place to fight on. But no, I'd kind of resigned myself to it. After what I claim, Kev, I don't know if you've heard this concept before, a Pyrrhic draw. The Pyrrhic draw that we got on Merseyside against Liverpool.
Yes.
Because it ensured, it was a Pyrrhic draw. You know, a Pyrrhic victory is when the cost of victory is greater than you might as well have lost. A Pyrrhic draw because it ensured that Igor Tudor was still in command for the home game against Nottingham Forest. So I think that's where it all went wrong.
Yes, indeed. Well, where there's life, there's hope. You never know. And there's still hope for Neymar. He wants to make the Brazilian World Cup squad. And is it almost a case of now or never? He's got to impress, hasn't he, between now and when Carlo Ancelotti picks that squad?
Yeah, well, he picks it in 3 weeks on the 18th, May the 18th. But really, Neymar's got to do it this week. This week really is now or never because there's 2 high-profile games. Now, he hasn't been doing it. He really hasn't been doing it. He looks way off. The only thing that you can be pleased about is that he has had a sequence of games. Now, one of the lines of defences that people have come out for him, and there are plenty, is that it's all the fault of his teammates at Santos. They're not helping him. They're rubbish. You know, if you put him in another team, you know. And yesterday, that one kind of died a death because they rested him for reasons I'll get into in just a minute for a tricky away game against Bahia. And they were better without him. They took a 2-0 lead. In the end, they had to put up with a 2-2. But it was a cohesive team performance. So the idea that it's his teammates holding him back has died a death. But what we've got this week, and this is the reason that he was rested. On Tuesday, they go to Argentina. They go to San Lorenzo for a game in the equivalent of the Europa League, and it's a kind of must-win for Santos. But rather than the context of the tournament, more important is you're going to be seeing him against Argentine opposition who will show him respect but no mercy in a stadium where it's going to be packed, atmosphere. You know, it's nothing like the World Cup, but you know it's going to be fiercely competitive. And then on Saturday, away to Palmeiras, who are the league leaders and one of the best sides. One of the big 2 in the continent. If he can't do it in these 2 games, I think that's it. I just can't see what any further basis for having faith in him. If he can do it in these 2 games, then I think he can get himself back in the conversation. So the stakes this week are really, really high.
Imagine Neymar doesn't get picked for the World Cup, Tim. What do you think this means for the rest of his career? I mean, he's defined himself so much by what he does for the national team, and not unfairly so. That's no bad way to be. But do you think there's motivation to carry on if he doesn't make it for the World Cup?
Yeah, good point. Well, if he doesn't make it, that means that Panini have got it right. Because they haven't included him in although I think they've only got 18. There is speculation linking him with a move to Major League Soccer, perhaps. He could become the Cincinnati Kid. But it's hard to see where he could go. It is, you know, why would he bother doing it? Why would he bother putting his body through the things that he has put his body through since that serious injury, the last serious injury in October of 23? And I do think there's a comparison that can be made with Messi here. After 2018, I wondered if Messi was ever going to play for Argentina again. You know, 2018 they were a shambles. And he came back, and for the first time, I think he made it his absolute number 1 priority. And he thought long and hard about what he needed to do in order to make it work. And he was already falling out with Barcelona at the time. But the key moment, it's the first competition under Scaloni, the Copa America in 2019. And they weren't great. They went out in the semi-finals. They got better during the tournament. But what happened there was that Messi suddenly became the vocal, encouraging force at one with his teammates, rather than someone who just shut himself off and intimidated the others with his silence and his kind of self-contained nature. And I remember Di Maria shortly after this competition. Remember, Di Maria's been playing with him for well over a decade before. Di Maria saying, "You know what? I like this Messi." Which kind of left it fairly open that he wasn't entirely keen on the Messi beforehand. And that I think was a conscious effort that Messi had made. What do I need to change in order to make this last bit of my career work? Now, with Neymar coming back off that long injury, the thing that I think he really needed to make work is emotional control. Just don't get involved in these ludicrous spats all the time. With the opposition, with the referee, with the supporters. Stop trying to draw meaningless fouls 50 yards from goal and falling over, and just calm down, for crying out loud. And he's made no progress with that whatsoever. And I understand in a way that there's a lot of frustration there, that his body can't do what it used to be able to do, and there is frustration there. But I really hoped that after such a long injury layoff, he would come back applying himself to something that I think he really needs to change.
Yeah, Neymar not fully fit at the moment, and Estevao certainly not fit at the moment. Serious injury for him. I have to say, Tim, I'm absolutely gutted because he's one of my favourite young players that we have at the moment. I think he's a phenomenal talent. You were telling us about him for a long time before he came to prominence with Chelsea with that move there. But there's a good chance he's going to miss the World Cup, isn't there?
Well, we shall see. He's still very young, so he's got youth on his side. He may have Brazilian medicine on his side. That's what has to be decided in the next few days. It looks like Chelsea have accepted that he doesn't have to have an operation, so there's a chance. But there'll be a tug of war now because Brazil will want him to come back on the basis that they think their sports medicine is superior to that in Europe, and that was certainly true in 2002 when Barcelona was saying that Rivaldo couldn't play the World Cup. Inter Milan couldn't get Ronaldo fit. Well, we know what happened in that tournament in the end. There's also maybe a comparison because of his age with Pele in '58, who picked up a serious injury in the warm-up, and there was serious talk given to not taking him to Sweden. But the medical staff said no, because of his age, we can work around, and we'll work around the clock with him, and we'll get him back for the third game. And that's what happened, and the rest is history. So I think, especially given the fact that he's got 26, Ancelotti will wait for him if at all possible, because Ancelotti really has been the man behind his progress with the Brazilian national team. Estevao's first start came in Ancelotti's first game.
Would he take him even if he'd missed the group stage, Tim?
I think it's possible. It's possible. I think there is, because he's got 26, so he's got something to play with. But what happens if he can't go, or if he can't play at the start? Well, the obvious substitute is a fellow called Luis Enrique, who's in Russia at the moment, who's was sensational for Botafogo a couple of years back, and he looks great for Brazil off the bench. Maybe better off the bench than as a starter. It's good news also for Hyan of Bournemouth, who impressed in his debut recently, and I think would have more chance of making the squad. Insofar as Neymar goes, Ancelotti makes it clear that Neymar can't be a winger because he'll expect his wingers to work back, and he won't expect that of Neymar. But it could mean a change to the structure of the side. And one of the things we're all waiting to see, is it going to be possible to play the front four and only two players in central midfield, one of whom is Casemiro, in conditions of extreme heat? Now, if he loses Estevão, I think there's an obvious temptation. Push Rafinha out to the right wing, and then you've created room for a third man in midfield. So that could be the most significant consequence of the injury to Estevão, that there'll be a change in the structure of the side.
Tim, now you realise I'm fully out here with my leaflets and my red, blue and white rosette, handing out campaign support for Endrick at the moment as he tries to get himself into the Brazil World Cup squad. I think it's really interesting because he's been through so much in this 4 months in Lyon so far, nearly 4 months in Lyon, not even 4 months in Lyon. But I think when we're making, regardless of what happens in this World Cup, whether he gets picked, whether he plays, whatever, there's been this sort of like accelerated development in the whole time that he's been there, because he arrived and was treated like a messiah because people were so excited to get a Brazilian on loan with Real Madrid, especially with the Brazilian connection that we have at Lyon over the years. The fact that he made an immediate impact on the team, that he was the player they were missing. And then he had this hard bit where the team wasn't doing so well. He wasn't scoring goals. He was being criticised for being selfish on the field and shooting too much, which was always a bit of a daft criticism because they literally brought him in as someone who would have a shot and make his own shot. But now again, in the last couple of weeks, as Lyon's fortunes have turned round, and by the way, he's been really altruistic as well. He's the third leading assister in Liga already, joint third leading assister, despite having only arrived in January. And how he really wowed people in that game that we were talking about last week against PSG is the fact that not only did he score or assist, but he gave interviews afterwards. Let's just recall the fact that he's 19 years old, in Portuguese, in English, and in French. Already in quite good French. Now, if you think, of course, the first thing everyone said when he spoke French and they were knocked over is the fact that Neymar was here for 6 years and he couldn't say anything more than bonjour. So
he could do "Ici Paris." He did that once or twice.
Yeah. That was pretty good. I mean, it's literally written on the side of the stadium, but we won't talk about that. Yeah. If we're talking about the template for how to live like a superstar, he couldn't be more different in terms of personality from Neymar, could he?
Well, that's no coincidence. That's people around him saying, look how Neymar has failed to achieve his potential. What do we have to do in order to change that? We were talking last week about Endrick is brilliant at seeking out experienced players and getting info off them. When he scored, it's 2 years ago now, more than 2 years ago, he scored the only goal at Wembley against England. He's just come off the bench. He scored the only goal of the game. It's his first goal for his country. And what's he doing in the post-match interview straight after the game? He's talking about how much he respects players who've played on this stadium before, especially Bobby Charlton. I mean, this isn't normal. This is the appliance of, there's obviously good people around him, but also a very, very curious mind. And it is interesting how he is really putting himself in contention, because if you follow what Ancelotti was saying about him, it seemed until comparatively recently that he was kind of thinking, yeah, he's one for the future, but not now. But I think that's changed a little bit, obviously, because of the injuries, opportunity knocks, but also because I was never that particularly keen on the move to Real Madrid in the first place. That he went to a club that didn't need him. Now he's gone to a club that do need him. And you begin to see the talent that's there, and it's very hard to imagine him not in the squad now. And who knows? I mean, if in the absence of Esteban, if Ancelotti wants to persevere with the front four, then one of the things could be Endrick coming in. Either starting from wide, which I doubt, or pushing Rafinha wide and using him together with Matheus Cunha through the middle. So that's a testament to how well he's done in the last few months.
Tim, always a joy and an education. Thanks a lot.
Look forward to the next time. Next time we can kick the ball around across the continent.
Looking forward to it very much. Tim Vickery there. Always great to have him on, talking all matters South American football. Coming up on Trans Europe Express, we're going to be talking Liga.
What's happened? Hello, matey.
What's happened?
You all right?
How are you, matey? You good?
I'm all right. Yeah, very well. Thank you very much.
Gaffer's gone.
Yeah.
Gaffer's slapped.
Yeah, last night's performance
Slap.
was unacceptable, mate.
Yeah, he got slapped.
Yeah, something.
Slap.
That could not stay the same. The run of results and performances have just led to this. I mean, you heard me last night. I was absolutely crestfallen last night.
Thought he'd done well, mate. Thought he'd done well.
Well,
First
the fact that he's gone suggests that he didn't. You know, it's one of those situations that something had to give, and we weren't. You know, you can't go through over 8 hours of football without scoring a match in a game in the Premier League. You can't do that. Those glasses look ridiculous.
What do you mean?
They hurt in your eyes. I'll put them on. They start to.
I can't see nothing.
So if I do some hand signals to you, you won't see them.
No, I can't see. I actually genuinely. I'm disappointed. He's a good manager, Rosina.
Well,
playing some good stuff.
He may well be in the future a very good manager, but right here, right now, things were falling apart at the seams, and they were falling apart quite quickly. The last goal we scored in the Premier League was away in a victory against Aston Villa 4-1.
Yeah.
That was in March.
Yeah, encouraging signs in.
And you can't carry on playing games. And last night's performance, it was unacceptable. That was completely unacceptable. You can look and you can lose a football match, and I've seen over the years Chelsea lose plenty of football matches, but it's the manner in the defeat, and the players, they need to look at themselves as well, by the way.
You're listening to Trans-Europe Express on talkSPORT with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell. We're going to talk about Liga now, and our headline is a nod to sugary snacks from the 1980s. Angers Delight. Andy, what's this all about? PSG with a comfortable victory. Look at you giggling away. It was Andy's idea, that headline, and he's very pleased with himself.
Showing my age there. Butterscotch.
Yeah, mine
was
too,
the best.
to be honest.
Shout out to Butterscotch.
Yeah.
Look, I think, as we said earlier, PSG pretty much tied up the Ligue 1 title by going and winning 3-0 at Angers yesterday. Kane Lee having a big hand in it. Lucas Berardo actually looking the part. In the sort of sentinel position. I mean, this was a really week of two results for PSG, because they had their game in hand against Nantes, which they played in midweek and understandably won 3-0, as you would expect. Nantes heading towards relegation to Ligue 2. And then they went and won this 3-0 as well. And in both of those games, Beraldo has played as a deep-lying midfielder and looked like he knew what he was doing, actually, which is quite interesting, of course, because he's struggled, the Brazilian, at various points as centre-back. He looks like a good footballer who's maybe not cut out for central defence at times. So maybe this is him. He scored a great goal in this as well, as you can see on the YouTube channel. He's celebrating in our images, and it was a really, really good effort all round. And the fact that they were able to rest Doué, Dembélé, and Kvaratskhelia huge as well. But really, the reason they were able to make this happen was Lens dropping points on Friday night, 3-0 down at half-time at Brest. Now, they came back to draw 3-3, and they had the chances to win it, even though the equaliser by Alain Saint-Maximin, which was a brilliant equaliser, by the way, from distance, right at the end, they still had more opportunities to get it over the line. And I found the reaction of Pierre Sage, their coach, quite interesting, Kev.
Yeah, he said that he'd been very angry at half-time, and then he was continued to be angry at full-time as well. What's really struck me about him, and we're both big fans of his coaching, I think, certainly at Lyon, and now the job he's done with Lens is beyond belief, really. To keep them in a Liga title race and get them to a cup final is excellent, but he doesn't mess about, does he? He's a very straightforward fella.
He really is. He's very plain and clear speaking. I think not in a shouty alpha male sort of way. He's just clear and to the point, I think.
You know where you are with him. Players talk about, when I speak to ex-players in commentary and I talk to them about kind of their experiences, the one word that keeps coming up all the time when I talk about, their relationships with other players and managers, honesty. Tell me the truth. If I'm not playing well, you can tell me. If I've not got a chance to compete for a first-team spot, tell me. That's what they want. They want to know where they are.
Yeah, he said at full time. The direct translation of the word he used was betrayed. But let's say he said he felt very let down. I think was interesting. And in a week where they had exuberant celebrations after they won the Coupe de France semi-final, which they'll play against Nice, a surprise that Nice won at Strasbourg to get to the final. And so, they could still theoretically win the double.
Yeah.
And if they finish second and win the Coupe de France, which, by the way, they're the only team to have been champions of France that have never won the Coupe de France. It's their first final in 28 years. And incredible celebrations
really,
afterwards.
Isn't it? I mean, I know they've been relegated. I know they've gone down to the second tier in the interim, but I see them as quite a big club. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? It's been so long since they've been in the final.
Exactly, Kevin. They're so passionately supported as well. But they've got the 10th budget in the league. And I was a little surprised at Pierre Sage coming out and sort of having a go at his players like this, and particularly the players that, having made rotations, players who don't play as much. And he said, well, look, I expect more of you guys. Of course, Florian Thauvin didn't start the game, but came on and scored the goal that initiated the comeback. But I guess that's what keeping high standards, and they've been sky-high standards, is all about.
You say that, PSG are almost certain to win it. You look at it, 6 points. Lens do have this game against PSG, don't they, coming up between now and the end of the season. Can you see any way that they can turn this round? Because PSG have a few wobbles here and there, and if they keep on going in the Champions League, is there any way you can see them taking their eye off the ball?
Like, if I'm being honest, absolutely not. But I think, I guess the mystery fixture is PSG against Lorient next weekend, because Lorient, despite the fact they lost to Strasbourg today, are a good team in mid-table with nothing to play for. They're not qualifying for Europe, and they're not going down either. They've got quality attacking players, as I'm sure Bournemouth will find out when they buy a couple of them and introduce them to the Premier League next season. And I just think, like, if that's right in the middle of the two fixtures against Bayern, maybe something could happen. Look, it seems unlikely to me, very, very unlikely to me, but who knows?
Much as I'm tempted to spend 2 minutes on you explaining to me when we stopped calling it the Claude Makelele role and started calling it the Sentinel position, we are going to move. I've not heard the Sentinel for the number 6. I like that, but we haven't got time to go into that.
It's all very sort of Emperor's staff in Star Wars.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
I don't know when a Sentinel got put in there, but there we go. Champions League race is a cracker, isn't it? You've got teams folding. You've got teams suddenly on the charge. It's been so much fun. So many twists and turns in the last few weeks, and this weekend no exception.
Yeah, Lyon had the benefit, in inverted commas, of an early start yesterday afternoon. They were meant to play Auxerre yesterday evening, but it got brought forward 3 hours because of a huge rap gig at the LDLC Arena, which is dead opposite where Asvel play their EuroLeague games.
Sorry, this should be the Brassell Venn diagram. Lyon won, and there was a big rap gig involved. What are you moaning about?
Yeah. I gutted I wasn't there, really.
That's what it is, really. Yeah.
But if I wasn't going to get a pass to go to Wigan versus Wimbledon, I wasn't going to get a pass to go to that, I suppose. So, they just about got past Auxerre, who are struggling to avoid the drop. They look destined for the playoff place now, Auxerre at the bottom, the relegation playoff place. A couple of goals from Roman Yaremchuk in that game, who's been a great signing, but Corentin Tolisso coming off the bench to score one and make one. The way they've managed him, we've been talking about managing players who are tired and injured. Paulo Fonseca has done a great job in that. Remember, they won at PSG last week without him, and he's the captain and one of the best players in the league.
Get him in the French squad. Come on, Didier, get him in.
Yeah, he was asked about that after the game, actually, and he said, Yeah, I was hopeful before the last round, and now I've just said I'm not going to talk about it in public anymore. But if you ask my dad, it's a different story. He's still really hopeful. But a response today from both Lille, who won at Paris FC, and by Rennes, who got a late win against Nantes. And like I say, it's curtains for them, really. Conceded a 96-minute equaliser last weekend, battered at PSG in the week, and concede a late winner, another stoppage time winner. Rennes today is just not happening for them.
Starting the week in a moment, but we'll bring you a bit of breaking news because it appears that Xavi Simons has torn his ACL. He'll be out for the rest of the season with Tottenham. That is a real blow for him personally because, of course, that's going to keep him out of the World Cup with the Netherlands. And it's a huge blow for Tottenham, of course, because he's a player, as we've seen in recent games, who can bring creativity to that team. But Xavi Simons out for the rest of the season with Spurs, who, of course, are battling relegation. Andy, just a quick word on that from you, just a quick reaction.
I feel bad about saying that Nantes have had bad luck now. I mean, look, Xavi Simons has been... He's shown in parts this season, I've seen a lot of Spurs in the flesh, how valuable he could be for Spurs, particularly if they're in a better position. But, I mean, it's been super hard for him to adapt in generally a poor team this season. I think it's fair to say they've struggled badly. But in recent weeks, he's looked really, really important for them. And look, I'm really hopeful, whether it's Spurs or anywhere else in the future, he gets to that point, he's still young, where he gets a team built around him, because he really deserves that. And I love him as a player. It's really sad news.
Yeah, that's what he needs, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Andy, who's your star of the week from Liga?
Well, you know what? I think it has to be Valentin Rongier of Rennes, one of the most controversial characters of the season. Crossed stories about how he left Marseille, but immediately was made captain when he arrived at Rennes, has been really important for them. And in a game in which they were really poor today against Nantes, Nantes had loads of chances in that game. They kept going. He scored the winner at the end. And it might be a reason they beat his old club Marseille to a Champions League place. If I can briefly go through how the Champions League places look. So remember, 3 is automatic, 4 is a playoff, so you go into the third qualifying round and then the playoff round. So Lyon third, 57, Lille fourth, 57, Rennes fifth, 56. Lyon play Rennes next week. Marseille 6, 53. Bad result for them tonight. And Monaco, who've had a bit of a bad run in the last few weeks, 51.
Yeah, and Monaco were related to my star of the week because I'm going to go for Toulouse's Brazilian striker Emerson. He scored a late equaliser in a 2-2 draw with Monaco, which is really damaging for Sebastian Pocognoli's team. Emerson's goals, by the way, have been worth 11 points to Toulouse this season. Coming up, we're going to look ahead to the semi-finals of the Europa League and the Conference League on Trans-Europe Express.
talkSPORT's Alex Crook has got some information about Enzo Maresca.
Yeah, I think the vibe coming out of the Northwest for some time now has been that Pep Guardiola is more likely to depart than to stay at the end of the season. Whether winning the Premier League title will influence that decision one way or another remains to be seen, but it does seem like the direction of travel is this is going to be the last few weeks of Pep Guardiola's tenure, despite the fact he's got another year left on his contract. There was always a suspicion, I think, from Chelsea that when Enzo Maresca left the club on New Year's Day, his next port of call would be Manchester City. talkSPORT understands Maresca very much the front runner. Should, as expected, Pep Guardiola step down at the end of his trophy-laden tenure at the end of the season. There has been some suggestions that maybe there's still some contractual issues with Chelsea. We're being told by sources close to Maresca that he is free to take another job as soon as this summer. And I've been told by more than one source that high-level talks between Manchester City, their sporting director Hugo Viana, and Maresca have been taking place. Now, that's not to say City want Guardiola to leave now, but of course they have.
You're listening to Trans-Europe Express on talkSPORT. Massive night of European action on Thursday, and we've got you covered across the talkSPORT network. So, Nottingham Forest against Aston Villa, an all-Premier League clash in the semi-finals of the Europa League. That's on talkSPORT. Jim Proudfoot, the commentator for that one, alongside the former Nottingham Forest skipper Stuart Pearce and the former Aston Villa captain Andy Townsend. And over in the Conference League on talkSPORT 2, Shakhtar Donetsk against Crystal Palace. Commentary from Alex Crook and the former England women's striker Leanne Sanderson. So we'll have every kick of those games across the talkSPORT network. Andy, let's start with the Europa League then, and Nottingham Forest against Aston Villa. Now, what I find really interesting about this is that Aston Villa, the narrative has been, with some justification, that they are legitimate favourites to win it. You've got Unai Emery, who is the past master at winning the Europa League. You've got a really good squad, and they've been, zooming along in the competition. Forest, you keep feeling, well, they'll be distracted by the relegation battle. Surely they're going to drop out at some stage. And they've come close to that. Beat Midtjylland on penalties, of course. But knocking out Porto might have changed a few people's minds.
Maybe. I don't think in terms of the way they played. But as we were saying, in cup competitions, that doesn't really matter. It's that you get there. And I think we've seen the grit and determination that they've got, and they showed those in both games against Porto. Bear in mind, they were gifted a goal in the first game.
That was wild, wasn't it? I still can't believe a back pass like that happened in a European quarter-final. Hilarious.
Yeah, nor can Diogo Costa, I don't think. But then you look at the fact that Porto played really well. I thought it was City ground in the second leg, despite the fact they played 82 minutes plus stoppages with 10 men. And it needed a deflected goal to get Forest in it. But none of that matters. And I saw Forest at Sunderland on Friday night. I thought they were enormously impressive. And what I thought was most impressive about them, we talked about how Atletico have become ruthless. We've seen that from Forest on some occasions this season, particularly under Vitor Pereira. I think you look at the away games, particularly against Fenerbahce, against Spurs in the Premier League, and in this one, it was not wildly against the run of play that they took the lead on Friday night, but blink of an eye later, it's 4-0. And really, I think that leans into kind of what you're saying about Forest, because not only do they have some enormously talented players, they have a really good squad on paper that, for whatever reason, hasn't clicked all this season. And I think when you go through four coaches, that's probably part of your answer.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
I think you look at some of those players you're expecting a little bit more from, and it hasn't really happened. But look, you underestimate, like, the return of Chris Wood is huge. And then you underestimate not just Igor Jesus, who was excellent on Friday night, but particularly Elliot Anderson and Morgan Gibbs-White at your peril. And remember, like Villa have been here before in Europe in recent times. You know, you thought they had it all set up in the Conference League final with Unai Emery as a coach against Olympiacos, and they managed to really like fluff their lines in that home game against Olympiacos.
You look at the other semi-final, we know there's going to be an English team in the Europa League final. Of course, last season there were two in the Europa League final. But the other semi-final, really interesting, Braga up against Freiburg, so a Portuguese team and a German team. I'll ask you about Braga in a moment, but I just want to have a word about Freiburg first from my point of view. It is phenomenal that they've got this far. And I'll tell you why. Yeah. This is a club that, up until the last few years, it was all about getting enough points on the board to stay in the Bundesliga. Under Christian Streich, who was their long-serving coach for a long, long time, they even went down with him and then went back up. They kept faith with him, and he built, year by year, layer by layer, a squad that was capable of getting to a DFB Pokal final, which they did. They only lost on penalties to RB Leipzig. And when he went, the feeling was, well, how are they going to replace him? I mean, this is a kind of on a lower level, a Fergie-type character. And Julian Schuster, who was Christian Streich's captain, has taken up the coach's role. He was also his assistant coach and has done a phenomenal job. They were knocked out, really unfortunately, of the Pokal semi-finals by Stuttgart on Thursday. And Andy, they've got a genuine chance here of reaching European final, and I cannot begin to tell people how crazy that is. If you'd have said to me 10 years ago, Freiburg are going to be in a major European final, I'd have thought they'd lost the plot entirely. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it is incredible. And, I think you have to say how the club has partly changed dimension with the new stadium as well, which has made a difference to them. But obviously, they're going to have to go to a pretty different stadium when they go to Braga for that first leg, which is going to be really, really interesting. Of course, one of the great stadiums of European football. Look, I look at this Braga team and I can't work out how they've ended up at this point. I mean, it's not as if they haven't got a decent squad, but it's always quite unstable. Carlos Vicens, the second coach of the season, has been under pressure for a lot of his tenure in charge. And then they go to Betis in the last round. They're 2-0 down after half an hour, and they rattle in 4 without reply, without their best player, arguably their best player, Rodrigo Salazar. So it's extraordinary, really.
My jaw dropped. I genuinely could not believe it, because also Betis had a goal ruled out, didn't they, to make it 3-0? I'm sure they had a goal ruled out.
Exactly.
Yeah, crazy collapse.
Yeah, it is mad. And, they're not having an incredible season by their standards. I don't think it's the best Braga side I've ever seen, but there is quality there. And I think there is guts there as well. You look at the way Salazar's responded after missing that penalty in the last minute of the Taça de Liga final as well, the League Cup. Against their big rivals Guimarães as well, and he's done fantastically since. They've got the experience of João Moutinho, for example, Ricardo Horta. Those are important things. But if you're Forest or Villa, you think this is a great opportunity, especially with the big names that have fallen out of this competition since the last 16.
Let's go on to the Conference League then. As I say, we've got live commentary of that first leg between Shakhtar and Palace. Let's talk about Shakhtar first. It's a club that you know very well. Wrote a very good book, We Play On, about Shakhtar. I'm going to happily plug that because it's excellent. It blows my mind when you think of the fact that they have not been able to play at their natural home for so long. Every game they play in Europe is an away game. You think of what they've been through, what they've had to get used to. Obviously, the situation in their homeland is still so tough for them to deal with. The fact that they have shown this level of quality and bravery to get to a major European semi-final is just enormously impressive.
Yeah, it is. And it's coming up 12 years since they played an authentic home game, Kevin. That's where they are. And in that time, this will be the third European semi-final that they've reached in UEFA club competition. They're closing in after a win today. They're eight points clear at the top of the Ukrainian Premier League, and they're heading towards their, I think it's 7th league title since then as well. So it's just extraordinary, really. And I think we can talk about busy calendars, and we have been talking about busy calendars, and I still think that's an issue throughout the show. You know, that's unavoidable when we're talking about the top level of modern European football nowadays. But the sort of travelling that they have to do is on a different level. You know, you're talking about long coach trips for every game, every European away game. You know, when they come over to London, it'll be minimum 12 hours for them to arrive in London. You know, you remember when Barcelona were bothered by the Icelandic ash cloud, which helped Mourinho to the Champions League in 2010. You know, Shakhtar do that for every European away game, and they've got no home games in between. So the fact that they would have played 4 league games since the last round as well of the Conference League, it's amazing. So look, Palace are favourites. There's no doubt about that. They'll be well received in Poland, where they've been playing all their home games, home in inverted commas games in the Conference League. But what is good about this Shakhtar is the model has slightly changed. So obviously they went very, very Ukrainian immediately after the full-scale invasion of Russia. But now they've started to bring back Brazilians, and Kevin, your namesake, has been the star one of those, really. The fact that they brought him in for just over 10 million euros and they sold him for 40 to Fulham, and that's going to be the template from now on. So I think you look at the team, it's really young, but there's a hell of a lot of talent in there, a real lot of talent in there. And I think a lot of these guys, like Neverton, for example, has been fantastic all season. Alisson, players like that, I think this is a great stage for them. You know, whether they get to the final or not, playing against a Premier League team like Palace, if they can put in a performance, this isn't just platforming Ukraine as they always need to do. It's platforming the talent that really they need to sell to survive.
And the other semi-final in that Conference League is a really intriguing one. Rayo Vallecano up against Strasbourg. Strasbourg had to come from behind in their quarter-final to beat Mainz. It was a really impressive comeback. We'll dig into that a bit more, I think, on next week's show and review that first leg and look ahead to the second. Coming up on Trans Europe Express, we'll go around the leagues.
Darren Bent had his Sound Drive show earlier, suggested a left field option.
I would go for someone in that type of concept that Jill Scott's talking about.
Yeah.
I would go for like Igor Thiago from Brentford.
He's been above and beyond.
He has been unbelievable.
How many goals has he got?
I think
he's second on the Premier League list.
He's got 21.
I think he's second.
Yeah, he's the first Brentford player to go to 21 Premier League goals, because Ivan Toney at 20, Visit at 20, and Mbeumo at 20.
Unbelievable.
Do you know what I mean? And Brentford are now on the cusp of Europe. I know they're 9th right now, but if you look at where they are in the table, I mean, they're only, 2 points over 6th.
Igor Thiago, yeah, he's had a great season.
Yes, he has.
He has. And fair play to lad. He's got himself in the Brazil squad, and he's a good player.
Yep.
Is that what we're talking about, though? Brentford player getting a player of the season?
No, I can't agree with Benty, but he has done unbelievably well, and he's a bit of a throwback. I kind of hope a little bit that what we see with Haaland and Gabriel the other day, where there's that centre half against the centre forward, where you're going toe to toe, backing the players, and he's a little bit of a throwback. Those number 9s that we used to see in the Premier League, they don't exist anymore. They're tippy-tappy football. The game is all about scoring goals. If you score goals on a consistent basis, you're going to get the headlines, right? and he's doing both. He's doing both. But who are those number 9s? Like those when I used to play. Like I used to play against I played with Kerry Dixon, right? As a Chelsea fan, right? Proper number 9, old.
Welcome back to Trans Europe Express with Kevin Hatchard and Andy Brassell. We are going to finish by going around the leagues. Andy, there is plenty to get through. Let's start with Turkey because there was an enormous game in the title race and it went the way of the leaders Galatasaray.
That's right, the Intercontinental Derby, Kevin, between Galatasaray and Fenerbahce as we get into the last knock-ins of the season. And really, kickoff was earlier in the week. Because Galatasaray announced that they were cutting off relations with the TFF, the Turkish FA, because they'd appointed Yasin Kol as the referee for this game, who they weren't happy with the way that he refereed the first fixture, where John Duran, when he was still there, equalised right at the end for Fenerbahce. They also weren't happy that he'd given, well, we saw it, we were on air at the time, a non-existent penalty to Fenerbahce against Beşiktaş right at the end of their game together a couple of weeks back, from which Kerem Aktürkoğlu scored to keep Fenerbahce in the title race. And then Fenerbahce as well we're making representations to the authorities to appeal that Victor Osimhen, they wanted him not to play because they said the cast on his arm, of course he broke his arm at Liverpool in the Champions League, would be a danger to other players. Despite being a light cast. As it was, that was rejected by the TFF and the league, and Osimhen did start this. He did score the opening goal as well with his knee, but by that point, Talisca had missed a penalty, which was given for a foul by Davinson Sanchez on Siddiqui Sharif. Galatasaray had a couple of penalty shouts turned down, which are really unhappy with Kol about. They did get a penalty in the second half, which was put away by Barış Yilmaz. And Ederson, formerly of Manchester City, of course, the goalkeeper. I don't think I've ever seen this before. Goalkeeper sent off for a second booking while he's waiting to take a penalty.
Yeah, you have to go some, don't you, really? Yeah, to do that.
He did well not to get sent off for the first booking, where he got right in the face of the referee, and the referee only gave him a yellow. But I guess those sort of things stay in the mind of referees. Lucas Torreira scoring to get the third goal. All this means 3-0 win for Galatasaray, and it means that they're 7 points clear at the top with just 3 games to go, and it extends the run of not winning a league for Fenerbahce, despite all the spending they've had in recent years, to at least 13 years. They've not won it since 2014.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of pressure for them, isn't it? Because Galatasaray have set such a high bar, it's really difficult to get there, isn't it?
And you know what? Fenerbahce have played pretty well for large sections of this season, particularly post-Mourinho, I must say. Domenico Tedesco's done some really interesting stuff. But honestly, I think the issues that they've had, and like the late goals they've chucked away, have been a huge problem. And maybe you can put that down to Tedesco, but some of it I do think is squad construction. But look, regardless of whose fault it is, Tedesco will get binned at the end of the season, because that's what happens when you don't win.
Domenico, it keeps happening to him. He was ahead of Julian Nagelsmann in their coaching class, but it just doesn't matter.
But Kevin, when was the last time you got asked for your A-level results?
Well, that's true. That's true. Never is the answer to that one, which is just as well, because I wouldn't know where they were. Portugal, sporting through to the Portuguese Cup final, Andy, and a great chance for them to win that tournament for the second season running. And Rui Borges, the coach, he's done a phenomenal job picking up the pieces after the Ruben Amorim and João Pereira debacle, hasn't he?
I totally agree with you. In any normal season, they would be top of the Liga. So it's remarkable, really, what's happened. Now they're in a real battle for second place with Benfica and Jose Mourinho. Of course, Mourinho's Benfica still not been beaten in the Liga this season, which is remarkable. They beat Madrid 4-1 this weekend. Sporting are playing tomorrow night. Of course, the second place is the only one for the moment. This will change after next season, but it's the only other place in the league that gives access to a Champions League place. If you finish third, you don't get in the Champions League. No qualifier, no nothing. You go into the Europa League. So that's absolutely vital for them. But they're playing Torrenense from the second tier, who've done an incredible job to get to the final. They beat Fafe from the third tier actually in the semi-final this week. But yeah, Sporting did really well to grind out the away leg this week, get a 0-0 draw against Porto to get through to that. But Porto are going to have the consolation of winning the title under Francesco Farioli. Look, I know Ajax bottomed out in the last part of last season and lost that lead towards the end of the season, which was remarkable to PSV. But he did a really good job at Ajax. He's doing a really good job here. And look, they're 7 points clear with 3 games left. They've all but mathematically done it, and next time out they can seal it.
In the Netherlands, Andy, one of the most lovely, life-affirming stories I've seen this season came about. Go Ahead Eagles this week.
Yeah, that's right. They congratulated their long-running laundry manager on her departure with a huge choreo, which was just beautiful. Look,
it's phenomenal. It's so good. It's so good. If you haven't seen it, check it out on social media. It's sensational. It really is.
Yes. So I went to Go Ahead Eagles earlier this season, and it's a really unique club actually, with a lovely little pub around the back of the stadium. Also, they have like a memorial corner. It's like this shed that's become a shrine where it's decked out in Go Ahead Eagles colours, and they people leave like photos and keepsakes from Go Ahead Eagles supporters who've passed away, so they're never forgotten as well. It's beautiful, and obviously after they had their first European adventure this season, they've avoided relegation comfortably as well, which not all people thought would be possible after Paul Simonis went.
Yeah, Paul Simonis left the club and went to Wolfsburg and had an absolute nightmare there and started off their terrible decline. But there we go. Let's go to Switzerland. We don't go to Switzerland very often, but we're going to because Thun thought they were going to win the league this weekend, Andy, and maybe we're a bit premature about it. Ended up not winning the league and made some arrangements that ended up being futile in the end.
Yeah, so they lost yesterday, but if St. Gallen didn't win at Young Boys today, they were going to celebrate the title, a sofa title, if you like.
Yes, sofa meister, yes.
Yeah, a phrase that's constantly used in Europe. But Chima Okoroli scored in the 92nd minute for St. Gallen with his free kick where YB just didn't bother really putting a wall together. So it sort of went through that. You'd have been fuming because, of course, like the Thun as a club invited everyone down to celebrate. And it's like, this is what we'll be doing in the event that we win it on Sunday when St. Gallen don't win. And yeah, they won it right at the end. I wouldn't have liked to be in that room at that moment.
No, that would not be good. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds and an open choice. You can either go to Ukraine or you can tell me about Andre Pierre Gignac.
Well, as Andre Pierre Gignac's not properly retired yet, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
The amazing
leave that on ice.
They had to him at Tigres. But I think we have to have a shout out. We talked about Shakhtar before, Dynamo Kyiv at Krivbas. They were 4-1 down at half time. They brought it back to 4-4. They went 5-4 down in the last 15 minutes. And 2 late goals by Andrei Yarmolenko. They won 6-5, and they got in the cup final this week.
Yeah, Andrei Yarmolenko still banging them in at the age of 64 or something like that, I think. Andy, it has been an absolute pleasure over the last 3 hours. They have flown by. If you only joined us halfway through, don't worry. All of the best bits will be rounded up for you in the Trans-Europe Express podcast, so make sure you check that out. I've been your host, Kevin Hatchard. It has been great fun. Thanks to Daniele Fisichella as well. You've been listening to Trans-Europe Express.
Sports.